the Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio host, and nationally recognized safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Join us each week as we discuss the best and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. Follow Dr. Perrodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.
Hey everybody, it is your good friend Dr. David Perrodin from down here in the North Star Recording Studio, and I want to wish you well. It is a brisk 54 degrees here on the North Star weather dial, which is cold, and it starts to chill me the longer I'm down here, but actually when I'm doing shows, I'm pretty good. But I'm just down here like working on stuff like, God, it's cold down here. And I will not miss winter. So yeah, we have had very little snow. So I know a few of you, Vanessa, your area, you've been getting a lot of snow, and boy, we haven't gotten much this year at all here in southern Wisconsin, and nothing really on deck. So February is kind of it for the big snowstorms, for anything to last. So, but yeah. So anyway, I am doing well. I wanted to give you an update. So, normally this would be a numbered Safety Doc show. And actually, this would be episode 169. But tonight is kind of just a break, touch base, catch up, kind of let you know what I'm doing. And so it is Shinobi Juan. All right, welcome, DJ Play Night, Shinobi Juan, Andrew, Vanessa. Let's do roll call here. MK Joe, Man Against the Masses, Solitude Surfer, all the way up here to Bacon Maldito. Bacon Inglewood hosting the Super Bowl. A lot of people think Bacon is either going to be signed to a one-game contract to the Cincinnati Bengals or the Los Angeles Rams, but I think it's going to be the Bengals. They could use a tight end. Bacon is tall, it's fast. He would fit the bill. A one-game contract for the Super Bowl. Bacon Maldito. POW Woods, welcome. So, yeah, this would typically in the sequence be episode 169. In planning for this week, I'm working with a guest who will be on likely next Monday. He's a locksmith, and it's cool, right? So he's going to talk about the things that are you need to be aware of for safety, if different kinds of locks and just like common sense things, and like don't buy this, but also these crazy stories with locks and kind of where the technology is going. So it'll be a fun show. So it's going to be more kind of on physical security, but then again, just this great guest. So last week. We had Jonathan Berger on the show. We talked about trucking, which is relevant, right? Just everything that's happening right now in Ottawa and up in Canada with a truck driver, convoy of 50 plus miles. And, so that was an awesome show. And so it'll likely be next Monday will be the show where I'll have the locksmith on. And then after that, I'm going to shift and I'm going to be talking about my book. So I'm going to talk about tonight kind of where I'm at with that, because the book launches on April 11th. So I'm going to shift gears and I'm going to start breaking down the book into sections and cover those during the show. Like, what is finding indicators? What is face validity? What is finite voltage? What is crowded behavior? So we'll spend time and I'll focus shows just on those concepts, which will be awesome. And I'll tell you, how about the nailmen, the Wehrmann M. Eisen, the nailmen in Austria and Germany in World War I, and these kind of wacky campaigns for morale, and it just kind of go through the book. So I'm going to start that in about maybe 2 weeks, and then that will run for maybe the next 8 to 10 weeks, because I want that to be built up before the book launches on April 11th. So Monday, April 11th, the book officially comes out. You can pre-order it now, stuff like that, right? But the book officially comes out, the AP press release, and like then I'll be pretty busy that week with media things and stuff like that. Probably still do my show, right? Um, but I want to have, so if people are searching, right, for the safety doc and the book, they're going to find some shows that will already have addressed some of this stuff. So I'm trying to put that together. So anyway, and you'll enjoy that, right? Like I put maybe like 3,000 hours into this book, so we're going to have these broken down sections. So shout out to Robert Ribbit Harrison running his Zero Weight Oil. PMW Woods is here. A lockpicking lawyer, Vanessa. Yeah, I've watched his channel for a long time. So yeah. And so the person I have on is going to kind of talk about some of the lockpicking lawyer type of things too. Like he's not the lockpicking lawyer that I'm having on, but he is very familiar with his work. And he's also going to tell you like, hey, like if you're going to get a lock for your bike or a lock for a shed or something like this, like here's probably what you want to do. Or like in a pinch, like if you're locked out of somewhere, like here's some, I don't know, tricks or whatever. He's not going to tell you how to break into places. So it's not a show on how to like open up a bank safe or anything like that. But we've been working on it. So what's the number one reason someone should buy your book? And I think the reason is to prevent mental collapse is ultimately the reason. Is we are in such an extended period of chaos, and just with acute chaos that strikes us also. Something happens, we're in a car accident. Clay Martin I interviewed in the book, his house burns down. Any chaos event that you have the tools through the book to, if you just spend a moment, you think about the book to get yourself through that, because people are collapsing. It's called finite voltage. 90 days into chaos, people collapse. In war, what would happen is you'd be killed, captured, mental collapse, or wounded, typically within 90 days without a break. So reading the book gets you ahead of the pack and out of harm's way, gets you in a better place than 95% of the people out there. And if you're in that place, you're probably going to be in good shape. And I think it also will validate you. So I'll get into that a little bit. It's a great question. Shinobi one, of like, why should you buy the book? Because I do. So I'll make a note over here. So I have a 2-page like thing that I send out to the press, right? So if I get contacted by channel, 1 out of Milwaukee or something, and they said, hey, we're going to come over and interview you about the book. Can you send us like some talking points? So I have like a front and back of here's some talking points. So of course, when they come in, they'll highlight a couple and kind of go from there. So yeah. And Vanessa said School of Airs was a good read, and well, let's do that right now, Vanessa. So thank you very much. I recommend everyone. So School of Airs right here. Rethinking School Safety in America. This was my first book, released in the fall of 2019. And you can get this, right, places that sell books. This one is, this book is 204 pages. If you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you're a taxpayer, right, there's all these different easements, like all these different connections you're going to make with the book. It's not just about school safety. It is going to give you the inside perspective. I was a school administrator of how these decisions get made, why bollards, these yellow bollards, get put in front of school doors instead of schools spending money on improving their two-way radios, which they use all the time, even like a recess and stuff like that. It's a punchy book. It's a fun read. There's a lot of stories, a lot of interviews. Thank you. Vanessa has read the book. So yeah. And, there's also like September 11, 2001. What was the psychology behind 500,000 people being rescued in 9 hours from Lower Manhattan? So books that have addressed that, by the way, books like American Dunkirk and stuff like that have addressed it more from a mechanical standpoint, right? Like, a different type of boats and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, there's more to it though. So, I worked with Dr. Paul Rapp, head of military medicine, New York City Department of Planning, and I have a chapter in there. And we're like, actually, it had a lot to do with what was happening when these people were growing up. Most people who were rescued were like average age like 41. And when they were growing up, early 80s, there was a lot of Cold War stuff going on. The 1983 movie on ABC, the day after, Rocky versus Drago. Remember that? Russia versus United States on the radio, Nina 99 Red Balloon. So it's all in the book. So, and you'll figure out like this whole term of torus, like how we try for self-similarity, right? And there's this thing called simulated annealing. That's in School of Air. Simulated annealing is, let's say you're supposed to fly tomorrow to Inglewood, Inglewood, California. You're flying out for the Super Bowl. You're going to get there early. You're going to hang out for a while, do whatever. You're going to meet up with a Bacon Maldito. He's going to take you to local Dismores, show you how awesome the deli is. So let's say your flight gets canceled because of the snowstorm. So suddenly, instead of flying there, you have to fly to like Detroit, and from Detroit you have to fly to Minneapolis, and then from Minneapolis you can decide, oh, do I want to take the train out there, or do I want to take a plane to Denver, or if I get to Denver, do I want to rent a car and drive? So all these things, simulated annealing means that instead of going from point A to point B, something gets interrupted. And then you have to come up with plans. So then you get yourself a little bit closer and a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And we're not typically programmed to do that as humans, like if we have this A to B. So that was one thing that was really interesting on 9/11 is how people adjusted to simulated annealing, right? So boats would come in and they would have bed sheets where they would just spray like Hoboken, the word Hoboken. So like if you could get on the boat, you could get to Hoboken, New Jersey, but maybe you don't live in Hoboken. But if you can get to Hoboken, it's closer to where you live. So then after that, you can either walk, take a bus, somebody can pick you up or whatever it is. So, but this psychology of simulated annealing is very important for survival too. So yes, I will break you from Rocky, from Ivan Drago, or Rolf, or Dolph Lundgren, who I wrote about in the book also. So yeah, a school safety book that mentions Rocky 4. So anyway, it's a fun book. It's relevant. It's, cited, it's factual. It's fun for me because, I once in a while, I'll open up my email and it's somebody who has bought the book, and, they appreciate it. But maybe they're a parent and they're like, I never kind of understood the safety stuff in my school before I read this, or the questions I should ask. Or sometimes it's people like a school board member contacted me and said, now I can use this book to make a counter argument against spending all this money on bollards and things that really don't make us safer. So thank you, Bolo here. Shout out Bolo. By the way, Bolo, 2,207 watch hours. So big jump. So thank you, Bolo, who has purchased 74 new devices. He has them all logged into his super Wi-Fi. His router, his mega router, costs him $1,000, and you can have up to 100 devices hooked into it at a time. He's doing a great job here helping the Safety Doc channel. So thank you so much, Bolo. So yeah, let me get this banner off of the screen here. So as I said, today is kind of just a break day. It's a day where I don't have to then tomorrow morning get up and write a blog post and all of that, just to kind of talk to you and to give you an update of where things are at. On Monday, I started teaching a university course. So it's a course I've taught for like 18 years, but I have a higher enrollment this semester. It's a legal issues course. So, there's a lot of complexity in it. And some of the students that are in the course, they're either, like first year administrators or current teachers, and their schools are either in person or not in person, tiling back and forth. So it's a different start to that class for me. So I've had to be more in contact with people than I usually am at the start of a class. So which is fine. It's different. So kind of that. And then also with my book. So there were some things with the book right now. I'll get into those more because I want to do a show just on like, what are some things that you have to do when you write a book, right? So, but there were two things that were happening. One is the book is done, right? So the proofing is done. I'll do a show on what proofing is. I found one kind of error in the book, one grammar mistake. There is an argument that could technically be right or technically could be wrong out of 67,000 words. It's not a big deal, but as a reader, you'll catch it the first time through, like about 3/4 into the book. It's just an irregular sentence, but for all the stuff that goes into a book, like it's pretty good, like with all the graphics and tons, 471 citations and stuff like that. And again, technically, you could argue like it's accurate the way that it is. It's it's the sentence is worded. There is something like that is what a 1,000 lights will do, and it says a, and 1,000 is 1,000, which technically, when you write a book, if you're above 100, you put the number. But when you read it, you're going to read it as a 1,000 lights, because your mind is programmed that way, right? So technically, it's kind of right, because anything over 100, if it's not a quote, you would put it as the actual number. So like if somebody reads it and they go back, they would normally probably just adjust their mind and just read 1,000, like they would just see 1,000. But I probably would have changed that, but that's something with the editor, and it's not a big deal. I mean, it's really small thing. But anyway, so this class stuff was I was putting a lot of time into that this week, and then also getting book things ready. So what happens right now with the book is I am, believe it or not, starting with the audio. Well, the audiobook releases after the print and ebook versions. So those come out April 11th. That's set in stone. Like that's already out there. And publisher's been advertising that, you go on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, place like that. So we have the AP press release done, which there's two things I need to change in that, which are pretty small. So like all these things you have to kind of take care of and tick off, like, tick off the box of that you've read the AP press release, because that's hundreds of dollars, right? And then I finalized the cover the cover art for the audiobook. And the audiobook is different, has a different cover than the print book, because with the publisher, print, so hardback, paperback, ebook, all were through my publishing contract. But in my publishing contract, I had it set up where the audiobook reverted to me. So I'm doing the audiobook kind of as a separate project outside of the publishing house. So it'll still list on Amazon. It'll still show up with that, with my other books, right? It'll still be in the same cluster and things like that. But I'm running that. So that's kind of a split. So it's the book, and it's narrated, but right, it's a little bit different. So I couldn't use the same image because the publisher paid for the image, paid for the cover of the book. So I had to go and thankfully, work with a graphic artist who's helped me throughout this process, and we came up with a similar looking title, cover, but different enough where it's not like a copyright issue. And then get this, and I want to get over to chat in a second. I didn't know this, but a lot of fonts are copyrighted. So, right, because I worked through a publishing house and never had to worry about this, and I wasn't publishing anything before this like that I would sell, but there's a companion document that will go along with the book. So I'm starting to work on the companion document, which is largely graphics, figures that I have made for the book. It's all of the endnotes in the book, the citations. So even though when the narrator reads the book, the narrator isn't saying like endnote 1, endnote 48, endnote 377, because that would be real clunky, like, oh, let's cut out. But to make sure that I'm properly noting, right, these citations of saying, hey, like these are in the print versions, and also like here they are. So anyway, like how you do those in font, like if you use Times New Roman or Arial or some of these things, like that's copyrighted. Like you technically, or not but you could be copyright infringement, intellectual property infringement against copyright trademark could be filed against you. So I learned that Google, all of their fonts are free from copyright. So you can use them for commercial purposes, whatever you want. So I'm doing all of this stuff in Word and putting it together, then importing it into Google, and I'm changing the font once I'm in Google to a Google font. But yeah, all these quirky things, right? You would think, oh, I'm doing a book, like I'll do it in Times New Roman. And the fact is, if you publish it, like Microsoft could do a claim against you of saying you've used a licensed font, and you have rights under, if you own Microsoft, right, which the whatever Office version I do, it's an older one. You can use it for purposes though, but once you turn it into a commercial purpose, then you're supposed to have a commercial license. So anyway, so I'm going to show you the book cover in just a moment, but let's get over to the chat. And again, I do have a terrific guest who'll be likely coming up next week. So this is well, hey, let's kind of work it back here a little bit. So he said, "Ballards, everybody take a shot." No kidding. God, I hate those things. There's an appropriate use for ballards, but like again, around in my community, in the school that put them in, and all the schools put them in, now they've been there for a few years, right? So now they're faded and they're starting to rust at the bottom. And of course, when it's snowy and icy, they're impossible to shovel around. And so like everybody realizes they're a mistake. And even when they bought these things that you could slide over the top to make them look like pencils and stuff, kind of like, to give some aesthetic appeal to them, like those have all faded. And I mean, like everybody's like, this is just a big mistake. So, yeah, and you should have spent your money on two-way radios. But anyway, so yeah. And by the way, and I am running for political office in my community, and the election is April 5th. So, there are things that I'm doing with that, right? So, and I'll dedicate a show to that later, and talk about the specific position I'm running for. I'll be on a ballot, like all of that's happening, but I don't want to talk about it quite yet because I'm kind of organizing my kind of talking points on that, but I will do a show specifically on what I'm running for, why I'm running. I'm going to have video of like, here are some things that are happening that I'll be a part of if I get elected and stuff like that. So yeah. So pretty interesting. Not where I hadn't really thought about this at all until kind of a few months ago, and then the opportunity was there, and some people around me were saying like this would be good for us if you were to consider this. And but anyway, I'll talk more about that. So Bacon and is getting a shout out there to or is giving a shout out to MK Joe. Inglewood, Bacon, Inglewood, Super Bowl. So big times. Hello, Doctor from Walter B380. Hey, Walter. So I drove past Coloma today. So our friend Matthew Hoover, CRS Firearms, and I'm sure a lot of you have been following or aware that Matthew's had a pretty tumultuous week. So yeah, I drove. I didn't stop in today where he's at, but I drove right past where Matthew is at. I had some things that I had to take care of today. And so I don't drive much anymore. Like I just don't have a real reason to drive, right? Because my spring semester at the university is online. The fall I teach in person otherwise. So I'm looking, and the last time I had the oil change, last time I had the oil change was in September. And today I had 1,800 miles on my vehicle since then. So I've gone like 5 months and I put on like almost less than 2,000 miles. So really like in a year, I put on like 6,000 miles on my vehicle. So I have a newer vehicle with a V6 engine, and it's garaged, and so I'm hoping as long as nothing happens to it, that it will last me a long time. But yeah, it's kind of like this whole reintroduction to the vehicle because I just I'm like, okay. And I had to check it today because with it's a 310 horsepower V6 engine, and so our other vehicle, our SUV, is a turbo 4, but a bigger turbo 4, so it has a higher RPM. But my vehicle with the bigger 6 runs really low. So like I'll be on the interstate and it'll be like 1,800 RPM, and even if I let my foot off the gas, it's like 1,800 RPM. It barely moves. Like it's always like 1,800 RPM. But the other vehicle runs at a higher RPM because it's a smaller engine, for less cylinders. But yeah, so it was kind of fun. Like you got to do that once in a while, get the vehicle out, get it some exercise. So, but yeah, a couple things I had to take care of today. So, and perfect weather. It was like 38 and sunny. So Vanessa said I should be buying the book at Amazon. Oh, hey, come on, that's awesome, Vanessa Moss, that's awesome. Thank you, so Vanessa. I mean it. Thank you so much for supporting the book, for being willing to write a review on Amazon. I have a lot of people who have contacted me, or people, um, well, I mean, people who I know who've read the book, right? And they said, "Oh, like I loved it," and I'm going. And I said, "Would you just please consider writing a review on Amazon? It doesn't have to be anything long. It can be 3-4 sentences, and just what it meant to you, why other people might want to buy this book, or even like check it out at their libraries, make people aware of it." And I'm like, oh, sometimes people don't do that, and they said, oh, I'm going to write a review, I'm going to do this. And the thing is, like, reviews are really big for the book. It's just it's just huge. I mean, the book has 45 reviews, which is good. I appreciate that. But I'm really hoping it continues to climb, and especially get toward 50 by April 11th. So, and I do have, so if you're interested in the book, your library should be able to get it for you. It's in hundreds of libraries across the country. And, you with this interlibrary share, or, contact me. I have a kind of redacted review, reviewer version, which is supposed to come out for people who would, be willing to leave reviews and stuff like that. But yeah, it does help. So Vanessa, I appreciate that, very much. And it is, I mean, it's really meaningful for me to go in and read it. And that makes it, when people are searching for, school safety and along that thing, student safety, and they see the book and they see the reviews and they start reading through. And then, especially if you're writing, like I have some, I have background in, for example, in military operations, and from my background, to understand how to prioritize your resources is essential. And what this book does for schools, for example, I'm not writing a review here, Vanessa, but is to really identify how you inventory and how you prioritize your resources, and how training is important, because you always have people coming in, whatever it is. But yeah, I appreciate that. So anytime I'll tell you, every single morning I get up and I check the book and I'm like, are there any new reviews? And when there is a review, I'm like, yay, like, and I will share it out on my social media and things like that too. So, but anyway, Vanessa, thank you. Teachers, those guys are trouble. 20-year teacher. Oh, PM Woods. Yeah. So I was a teacher too. So, and an administrator. So yeah, retired, I don't know, was it 2019? Math teacher since retiring. So good for you. Yeah, Vanessa. Yep. Oh, break. We talked about Ivan Drago. Hey, Bacon Kitty, Man Against the Masses. Snowstorm in Inglewood. That'll be the day. So, wow. We bought the 4-wheel drive vehicle, first one we've ever had. We had like one day so far where we could use it, but in Wisconsin here, it's usually a safe bet to go with that. Kind of kills the gas mileage, but we don't drive it all that much. Bolo, it's from Shinabi One. Hey, if you're not subscribed over to my channel, please do that. So this weird thing too with the channel subscriber stuff is I was at 1,182 subscribers for like the last 3 weeks. So it had this sharp incline to go from like 500 in November to like where I'm at. And then it just like held there, which is okay because I'm above 1,000, which I need for monetization. And then, 4,000 hours, I need more watch hours. But yeah, if you can let people know, we've got the Face Validity Friday show, which is a lot of fun too. Like we go through the headline. I've gotten much better at that too. As we go through the headlines, and you're like, if this isn't a headline, this is what it likely means. If it says like by staff reporters, it's not going to be very comprehensive. And then all the little buzzwords we kind of look for, and then like the face validity things where we check against it. And like now that we've done it for like 3 months in like 4 articles, so we've gone through, we've gotten really good at it, kind of working as a group together on those Friday mornings. So, hey, Andrew. Vanessa, I can get to you if you get near here. So, Shinobi once said, having a strong mind very important. Many survivors don't lack or last due to mental breakdown from loneliness or lack of social connect. Yeah, you're right. And um, I think, again, when people, and that's something when you go through I wish I could hold up the book. Like I'm always kind of looking like for where's the book I can hold up because I don't have it yet. Um, the publisher will soon have my first, hard copies here, but I don't have them yet. Yeah, it is. I think if you anticipate what's going to happen, most likely, and the book will lead you through that with numerous examples from like Larry Lawton, you know, being a prisoner, to Clay Martin as a sniper, Robert Travis as an Alaskan crab boater, where one chapter starts out, title of the chapter, "All four of my bosses are dead." Um, once you can identify the indicators, and Joe Dolio, such an important contributor through the interviews of the book, Nikolai Razavayu, the Soviet cyclist who had to cycle in Kyiv the day after the Chernobyl disaster, and he's watching the city workers out there scrubbing down the roads and washing away the radiation. Although they're not saying that, right? And he's like, whoa. If you identify this, and then also, the mental of knowing the timeline, of knowing like, okay, at 90 days, this is probably going to happen. I'm going to start to observe this. And then here's how I can respond to that, like to build resilience. There are a lot of things like, journaling, believe it or not, like journaling is a big thing, or video journaling, where you date things and you have this progression where you're moving forward. Because this whole effect of time dilation, we need experiences to make us feel as if time is passing. And during chaos in real uncertain times, we tend to like hunker down, cocoon, and we don't have new experiences, and time gets really slow. And that's when people especially start to crack. And as you said, Shinobi one, lack of contact with people. Yeah. So really, really well researched, fun to read, and the interviews, but it's a professional book. But again, anybody coming into this is just going to get a lot of it. Hey, Mexi Mike, thanks, buddy. Thanks for coming over here. Vanessa, best times ever were my stays at the White Alice radar sites, barely 6 people there at the end of them. Yeah. So one of the things too is maybe our friend Solitude Surfer, if he's still around, can chime on this, but solitude and, kind of, I wouldn't say being alone, but not having a lot of contact with people isn't necessarily bad. And during, chaos and things, the fact though is the people you are in contact with, you need to change your relationship with them. So you're getting information from what they're observing, what's happening in the outside world. So you can kind of triangulate like what's happening, right? Because when we had all the stay-at-home orders that hit in March and April, where, people weren't traveling and things like this, people had no idea what was happening in the next county or the next, city, state across the US. So that people really felt isolated. So if the network that you do have, ask them, what's happening by you? Like, what are you observing? That's what's in the news, but are the stores open? Did they change their hours? Are your hospitals not doing elective procedures anymore? Like, what's up? So I suck into Meximix. So thanks, guys. Mexi Mike. What up, Mexi Mike? So Mexi Mike, I think I've seen you over at our good friend Aaron Clary, the Clary podcast. So thanks, and please sub to the channel. Like I said, like the channel had this meteoric rise up to 1,182 subscribers and stay there for 3 weeks in a row. So I'm like, come on, like let's keep it going. So perseverance builds problem solving, which enhances the perseverance. Yep, absolutely. And so there is a segment of the book that focuses solely on what you're saying, Vanessa, in the velocity of information, perseverance, and how you start to build resilience, and then how that kind of compounds, and then how others see that in what you're doing, and it can have an effect. If it's your kids, right, like that they can see it in you, they can start demonstrating behaviors which increase resilience and perseverance. And so, like I said, the book has been peer reviewed. It's coming out of the gate very strong. The publisher's super excited about it. I'm thrilled. So I was talking this morning with my local library, so I live in a town of 10,000. So this is it's kind of a big deal, right? Because this is a book through a traditional publisher. It has a big marketing campaign behind it. Um, and we're going to be doing an author event, and then we'll do a media event where I'll donate a couple signed books and things. So we were talking about that, and I'm going to loan them some wall art that I had made up for the book, so they could put it on an easel, in the library for a month or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of a big thing. I mean, well, not kind of, it is a big thing. So I'm excited about that. And by the way, so the universities that I've attended, this, so throughout the years, I have 2 master's degree and a PhD. So not a path I would tell anybody to take, but anyway, so I emailed the universities, the alumni associations. I say, hey, I got this book coming out. I appreciate if you put in your alumni catalog or, your alumni magazine coming out on your website or whatever. And they're like, yeah, it's good. Right. And then one of them emailed me back. So this is reverse transcript. This is a lapel pin from UW Stevens Point in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. So the person I emailed up at the alumni place, like that does the magazine, said, hey, like we have these alumni pins or pins, like lapel pins, and we'd be happy to send you. I'm like, sure, free, right? Apparently they give them out to new grads, and I graduated a long time ago from there. But so I got this bag, and they had 3 of them in there. So I'm like, okay, 3, I guess I got backups in case I lose one. But so I got 3 free lapel pins here. So yeah, this is the old main building at Stevens Point, Wisconsin. So which used to be the site of the training camp for the Green Bay Packers back in the 50s, by the way. So let's keep going on here. Perseverance. What do you find sells more, a book's audio, ebook, or real life book? So that's a great question. So Shinobi one with School of Airs only came out in hard copy and ebook. So those were the only, it never released in paperback. It was supposed to, and I don't know why it didn't with the publisher release in paperback, but it's like, it's been out 3 years, so they're not going to release a paperback of it now. So in that case, hard copy sold more. I don't know what will happen here. Well, I kind of know. The Velocity of Information will release in hard copy, which is $75, which is a lot, right? So, but it's also appearing as a university textbook. So I've seen it when I do Google searches and things like that. And I know it's being marketed in sociology, psychology, philosophy, things like that. So obviously there's a market there. It's not a university textbook, but some instructors will use it like that. But the paperback book is $35. Now, part of this is inflation. Had the book released a year ago, all those numbers will be down. The ebook is $33, which has like an ebook reader on it. The audiobook price has not been set yet, and that will be the least expensive of all the options. And it's a professional narrator. It's a professional actor who's on a TV show, which a lot of you probably have seen. And guy's in his 30s, so there'll be a formal announcement coming out on that. But I would anticipate the paperback will sell the most. Ebook, yeah, I think the publisher overestimates how, that the ebook, people with Kindles and all these things like will want to have the ebook portability and they can be read, and like, I don't know, I just don't see it. And I worked at the School for the Blind for 4 years too. And like the ebook stuff wasn't nearly as popular as I think what publishers think it's going to be, and how, the computer voices can read things. It's not the same. And so I would guess the paperback will do pretty well. It's very much worth your money, right? It's, but I think the audiobook will do well. It's my first audiobook. The audiobook will be an international release, but again, you can get it if you're with Amazon, right, and ACX and all of that. It's not an ACX release, but it also has library saturation involved in it, and because it is a lower price point, and I just think people are moving in that direction. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where things go. I would say ultimately paperback will be the top seller, and I would think I think audiobook will be the second. But we do have a full campaign, that will come out on audiobook, and I think this will be an awesome book to listen to as an audiobook because of the dozen interviews in it, right? Larry Lawton, Linda Stone, Robert Travis, Juan Brown. So as you go through this, it's not like you're listening to a text. It's not a textbook. That's not what this is. It's going to be it'll have this excitement, this real personal touch to it because, again, all these interviews. So, but yeah, I'll keep everybody posted on that. And so Garamond Bold, DJ Playness, I think we're talking about fonts. Yeah. So I've got to check up a few things on fonts, but I do know that anything you do in Google Docs, those fonts are free for commercial use. Copyright fonts are the precise reason for all my published books will be windings or windings. So yeah, that's a big, I never knew this, right? I never had any idea. And of course I worked with a publisher, so I knew, and the publisher would take care of all that stuff. And of course, the publisher, if someone tries to make a PDF bootleg of the book, right? Publisher will be the one who will, take their legal team and go after them and stuff like that. So I never had to worry about these things. And of course, all the images I used in the book and figures, I had the permissions and releases, and some of those were custom designed just for the book. So really no issue with any of those. And the book is thoroughly cited and things. But yeah, once you do audiobook too, getting an ISBN number for the audiobook, how copyright is noted on an audiobook. And I worked with the audiobook distributor on that, of saying, here's how certain things have to be set up. And so, but yeah, Doc, you should get one of Chad Elkins' spicy clients to narrate the audiobook. Wow. Yeah, I'm sure that would probably sell a lot of audiobooks. So yeah, that, I'm smiling, right? So, but yeah, this is from our friend Guns and Barbecue, Jonathan Berger. Hey, Guns and Barbecue, Jonathan, thanks. And I learned a lot about our show last week and how relevant with everything that's happening right now with the truck driver convoy happening in Ottawa and Canada and just kind of worldwide. I think a lot of things we talked about are educating people and kind of we talked about the brown bag brigade and I wrote that blog post, and so I'm really timely. It's a great show. G23. Hey y'all. Hey G23. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do so. Go in right now. Subscribe to Safety Doc Podcast. Military bases use all sorts of barricades and bollards up to concrete structures. Yep. So yeah. So they have their place. But for when you read in School of Airs, for example, when schools get money and they put bollards in front of doors, the thing is, people aren't ramming through doors of schools to bring violence upon schools. That just isn't the pattern. So, when you look at all the needs, two-way radio communications, that you can talk building to building, maybe even cameras to something, whatever, but bollards is going to be way, way down on the list. And then also in the book, I had a section where bollards on bike paths, for example, were causing deaths and maiming. Pete Medic of Ohio Bike Association, I think I wrote about in there. I'm like, this stuff is, it's crazy. As people put these things out there without really, once you put a bollard in, you're pretty committed to that, right? You can't, it's hard to get those things out. You'd have to rip the whole concrete out. So +1 New Zealand vote. So Guns of Barbecue. Hey, what's up from Bacon? It's yo, Flying Rich. Yo, Flying Rich. So yeah, Flying Rich. I went past CRS, his place today, his retail place. I was driving through that area to go to another area, so didn't stop in, but gave a thumbs up as I drove by there. So CRS lives close to me. Walter wrote, Doc, should I request ballots for all my dead relatives? Yeah. So don't do that. So we don't need Doc to be in the news for any. It's a contested position. I do have there's one other person running, so we'll see what happens. The yeah. Uh, anyway, I'll get into it a little bit more, but I do need some footage, some video to really kind of to make sense of what I'm running for, and it's a 3-year term in my city and what this would mean, and things like that. Um, so yeah. In case anyone isn't aware, here's a GoFundMe, Matthew Hoover. So thanks, Bacon. So yeah, I see it was over $100,000. So Matthew Hoover was a guest on the show, and we talked about the 4 ways of chaos. And yeah, he's also helped me out with some technical things on the show of like, here's some things you can do for SEO, for your thumbnail stuff and things like that. So yeah. Vanessa Kitty, if I wrote a book, it most likely come out as oh no, after you've left us. So I wrote, talking about books. So first of all, let me do this. Let me switch over and show you what the cover is for the audiobook. So this was decided this week. So, it was one of those things, like I had time, but I didn't know if my guest would be on tonight or if I would do a show, and I didn't exactly know what I would focus on tonight. And I thought, well, maybe I just take a break. I've done a lot of shows, and but let me bring up what the cover of the audiobook will be. So right here, this is the cover. That's the cover of the audiobook. Now, it has to be, this is a square, and it has a certain DPI or DPI density, dots per inch, right? And so this meets all the requirements, but it's a square. And now that is not the cover that is actually authentically on the book, but it's similar. But that image, that font is not copyrighted, and then also that image is in Creative Commons for commercial use. So, and all those things have to be noted, like when you put that stuff out there. But anyway, it's cool because it's similar to the book, and it also sets it apart like the audio version. So I'm going to have that made up as artwork and put down in my basement office here, because I have the 2 books I wrote, the artwork as 20 by 30 wall images, and then I'm going to have this one put up next to it just as a square, obviously. So Vanessa was writing about, I was talking about books, and so I wrote a book when I was in college. It was called Man on a Mission, and I wrote it one summer, probably like 300 to 400 pages long, and I scanned it. It was done on an Apple IIe computer. So I don't know if you guys remember the Apple IIe, say a little floppy disk that you put in, and then like it would have the printer. I don't know what the wheels and what is it, the dot matrix printer. So there wasn't any way to convert that. So I just scanned it. I scanned it all in, and I have it somewhere as a file. But it was about the main characters was Keith Reno, and it was a college student who lived in the town he was going to college at. But he's a college guy, but this is like his hometown. And then it's like all these other characters. And there's one guy, I forget, he's commuting. And so I wrote this like back in 1992, and this guy's commuting. So he has like this TV on his dashboard, and people are like satellite beaming the lectures and stuff to him because he's always late for class. But anyway, it was a pretty fun book, and it had this, and the owner of the it's like a comedy, right? The owner of the place where Keith Reno and his roommates live is a mob boss, and they don't know it. and so they start to get ideas, like they're like, well, why is our rent so cheap, and things, and it gets into this whole like subplot of this apartment building that they live in is owned by this mob boss. But it's a cool story, and I wrote it start to finish, but I never tried to publish it. And actually, like today, like politically, oh my God, like for political correctness, that would be a very difficult book to, like you'd have to self-publish it, but it would be very difficult to, I don't know, gain traction with it. I don't think I'll ever do anything with it. It was fun to write at the time. Although I wrote a second book in maybe around 2006, and that one was historical fiction called Past Infringement. And it was about the fort in my town here, Fort Winnebago, which was built in 1824. Jefferson Davis served here. And there's a lot of interesting history of significant players in the Civil War that served at this fort when they were very young, like 20 years old. And I worked with reenactors. So the cool part when I wrote this book and did the research, the premise of the book is that there is this main character, Seth Parsons. Actually, I had this like pretty much done too. Like it's probably about 300-page book. And so I was a tour guide out at the fort, right? So I was like learning this stuff. But I had this main character in the book. His name was Seth Parsons. And he was like 40 years old. He was retired or discharged out of the military for some medical stuff. And he had been researching the Confederacy, and he thought the Confederacy stored gold bars at a couple northern forts because they thought that the forts, if during war, would defect, and they could then use this gold to work with the Native Americans and the Canadians and whatever to get support and kind of crush the North, So this was kind of viable too, because if you go back and you look at the Civil War, there were some efforts to have the Civil War more in the 1840s and 50s than 1861, 1865. We had the war with Texas, which kind of interrupted things and moved troops and focus. And anyway, I knew a lot more about it when I was researching it. And it would be funny because I was watching a TV show like on the Travel Channel, back in like 2006. There was some guy that was talking about how these codes would be written in Southern newspapers or like all these different things. So like I emailed him, I found his address and I'm like, hey, I'm writing this book. And so he like sent me his big packet of stuff. And I don't know, I think we had some phone conversations and stuff, but I learned some basic coding, like how you do these secret codes. And I had some of that in the book. It was really cool. But anyway, the Seth Parsons is the main character of the book, Past Infringement. So he comes to Portage, Wisconsin, and his thought is he thinks that the gold is still on the fort site, which largely the fort site now is farmland and stuff like that. And he finds out that this farmland is going to be developed. So he feels there's only so much time, like he can check out, and he's using his old maps and stuff. He's running out of time. So he makes contact with one of his former professors, who's the antagonist, like he's the bad guy. But Seth Parsons doesn't know this at the time. So he calls this guy and he says, hey, like, I need you to come out here. It's one of his former professors at West Point. So this guy comes out and he's the two of them. And so Parsons and the professor's name is David Henry. He's trying to convince Henry, hey, I think there's gold out here. And Henry's like, it's crazy and stuff like that. But then Henry's kind of like, maybe there is. So anyway, it comes down to the point where they find this gold and they have like days, right, to get it out. So they're trying to figure out this plan on how they're going to get this gold out and this whole escape to El Faro, Honduras, right? So, I mean, it was amazing. But in the time, like Seth has made these connections in the community. He doesn't know if he wants to leave, if this is all worth it. But then he's actually this professor, this David Henry, this former West Point professor, is planning to kill him, right? So once they get the gold out, and he actually kills one of the community members who knew a lot about this and the maps and stuff. And the community member, this guy's starting to kind of figure out that there could be more going on here. So it has like this little paranormal like twinge to it of the Native Americans that had lived in the area. And this is a good book. I wrote it at the same time National Treasure came out, and some people or one of the workers took it and read a chapter or whatever at the Daughters of the American Revolution, their gathering, and they thought it was really good. And I would meet with reenactors all over my state. Like I would actually go down to like Iowa, and I would bring down the book, my printed stuff, and I would sit down with them, and I wouldn't tell them I'm working on a book. I would just say like, I'm a researcher, and I found these things out, and what do you think? and they'd be like, whoa, like, that's pretty awesome, or that could be true. And so then I would tell them, like, yeah, it's not. I don't know if it's true. I'm kind of making up the story, but like it's all plausible. It even comes in with like the assassination of Lincoln. But it's a cool story. Past infringement. I had a cover I did for it and stuff like that, but I never took that anywhere. And if I were to do anything with a third book, I think it would be that, and it would have to be like self-published, or I don't know who would really publish that, but it's pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty, but so those are like, the first one was completely fiction. Then this one is historical fiction with fact in it and stuff like that. And then of course, there's School of Errors, which was a book I wrote under contract, and now Philosophy of Information. So let's do Bolo. So Bolo wrote, I'd read a book about participating in nature. Canadian outback is beautiful. Cool. Yeah. Be great. And one of the things for mental health is being out in nature, being out in green space. Had to wash it today. My black car looked like white from the salt. Yeah, I get that too. We have one black vehicle, one white. So the black one I had it taken last week. And I do a little pre-wash at home on it, and then take it through. I'm halfway through writing a book for my son, The Codex of Life. Maybe it might help him. That's awesome, Shinobi One. That is really cool. That is really cool. And I'm going to talk about my, so as I kind of structure this out with some of the upcoming shows, I'm going to talk about like what was my process for writing a book, right? Like, I did outlines, major outlines, and then all these Google folders where I was putting together like chapter titles, and then like what I would research in that chapter and what I'm trying to convey in that chapter. And I had one folder, it was just research articles. And as I would read them, I would move them up to now they're read article, and then they have a little summary, or I would go in with Adobe and put some notes within them. So, the whole process of how to structure that. And I learned a lot in my college doctoral dissertation of how to cite. So you're not like trying to come back and say like, where is this? That actually happened in the Velocity of Information. There was a front page of the Topeka, Kansas newspaper from like 1914 or something. And I quoted something off of that, but it was, I couldn't find it again. And it was like behind paywalls and whatever. And I had to go through like great lengths to finally find that. I don't know if I had to contact somebody with the newspaper or something. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure like this exists and all this stuff. And they sent me like a scan of the front page of this newspaper from 107 years ago or whatever it was. And so some of those things get kind of quirky, but yeah, so I learned a lot, and I'm going to try to share that. And also like, what it was like for me to write a second book through, that will be an international, not so like the books that I write they will be, I mean, you'll enjoy them, right? But they're more, these are books that libraries soak up, right? And these are books that show up on Google Scholar, and people will cite in doctoral works and stuff like that. And, kind of on that nonfiction side. But like, what I learned, what my process was in books. And I think writing a book is awesome. Like it's a huge commitment. Like, I mean, it is a big chunk of your time in your life to go through and to write a book. But hopefully, I can talk about the things I got better at as I did a book, what different editors do, how to organize your information, things like that. So again, I was fortunate that I was able to get 2 publishing contracts. So, and the question is like, is there a third book? No, probably not. Like I said, I might take that past infringement and change that one up. But I think there is a book to be written, though. I think there's a book that would be titled Finite Voltage. It would be about human mental resilience. And it would be a complement to the Philosophy of Information. But I don't know exactly how that book would look. Like, I don't know if it would feature some stories of like some people that went through incredible resiliency events or burnout, or that I don't know. I know there's something out there with it. I just don't quite know what it would look like. It's going to be interviews. I don't know. So anyway, but I can kind of see like the cover, like finite voltage, or like, stepping back from, like, it would be like finite voltage, and then the subheading would be stepping back from the edge. So, but yeah, any ideas, like, post them or let me know. But I think in that book I want to get where people really, or situations really, get to the cusp of, causing harm to self or others or whatever, and how you come back from that. I don't know. So, whoa. New York Outcast, I'm way behind in the chat. So let me get caught up in the chat. Here's one. What is your opinion of the situation in Ottawa? The fact that they say the funding to keep truckers there for it's crazy. I support the truckers fully. I think Trudeau was cowardly to leave. I don't think he was in danger from the truckers. And now, and plus saying now he is ill, but yet has been nonstop on social media. I think, and no, people are supporting the truckers. They have a right to express, and hopefully that GoFundMe doesn't get wiped out or taken out. Shinabi 1, my books will probably be written in crayon. Oh my goodness. Brother with bacon, make sure you flavor each page with bacon. So let me get up a little bit. Hey, it's our good friend DLD After Dark here. What's up, brother? Great to see your tour channel grow so girthy. Yeah, I'm hoping to get to like 1,200. So let's just keep it going. If you haven't subbed the channel, please do so. Appreciate it. Is Dark? He's giving a shout out. It's TLD over here to Bacon. So I think like we're caught up here. So, yeah. So, so as far as the book, so now it's working with the narrator. So when the narrator gets the book, I have to have all of the notes. I have to go through the book and find names. Like, here's how to pronounce Razavayu, like Nikolai Razavayu, the cyclist, because you wouldn't understand that from just reading the name. It doesn't sound like Razavayu, right? And you give directions on, don't read the notes, or like read this section, or like if there's a block quote, like maybe put according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics or whatever. So I have to go through and get it ready. So when he narrates it, right, like this is all available. And I also did some little audio files. So I had audio files where I would read people's names, and I'd, so he knows how to pronounce them. So then in the comment, I would link over and say, here's the audio file, listen and to this person's name. Now there's not a lot of that in there. But because he takes the first look at it, and then I come back and do this, and then he does the second pass and comes up with any questions. And once a narrator starts to read the book, then the narrator might provide you 1 or 2 hours worth of narration, and then you have basically 48 hours to listen to it, and then timestamp if anything is off, or that you need changed in the book. And then get it back and say, yeah, you're at the 28 minute and 4 second mark. What you said this, and we need to change it. So there needs to be this real commitment on my part to listening, and then having, of course, the manuscript in front of me. So I'm going through and tracking, making notes. I think we'll be in pretty good shape. And then with my distributor, the audiobook can't distribute right away by contract. It has to be delayed after the print version. So, but I need to make sure everything is set and ready to go. So my distributor said, yeah, we'll check everything. We'll just like have a delay on the release. So, kind of going through that. But there's a lot of work with the narrator on how to pronounce things. What are you going to do with some of the figures? Like, some of the figures have to be described. Like there's a figure of the Admiralty scale, how to evaluate data, information like that has to be described. You just can't omit that. But there's some things we'll just omit, like some images in the book we'll just omit in the notes. But then what does that look like for someone who wants to know more about the book? Like, you have to put that in the PDF. So there's much more to this than what it seems. And again, the artwork needs to have certain specifications of a square and certain dots per inch and stuff like that. So This is your channel. Sorry, not tour channel. Life is hard. So yeah. Um, uh, what is this? Is from Shinobi. Idea: write the book from the point of view of the person suffering from thoughts of self-harm or process of mental breakdown. Have them meet with someone you and share their real life thoughts. So, I mean, it's a great idea. I've contemplated: does this become a story that kind of focuses on one person? Usually what I write has a lot of citations and a lot of input to it, or does this become like more focused? Or is this something where I'm going out and I'm finding 10 or 12 people and I'm sitting down and I'm doing pretty comprehensive interviews with them, and I'm trying to then pull out these themes of this finite voltage, and really it would be like, how do you recover? Because the thing is, like in the velocity of information in World War II, if you were got to the point where you're like the old sergeant syndrome, like you're completely burned out, like you are, as they would, World War I, they would have said shell shock, but it was very hard, if not impossible, to recover from that. It was pretty much end. Like you could come back to the United States, you never would recover from that. So you don't want to get to finite voltage, right? You don't want to get to that point where you psychologically break because your likelihood of recovering is just not there. So how do you walk back from that step? I watched this thing called American Nomads, and this it had some of that in it, where there was this guy called Yogi who went to, I don't know, some cliff in Alaska or something, and he was going to jump off, and it would have taken like 2 minutes to fall and kill himself or whatever. But when he was out there, he just discovered how beautiful it was, and then he just basically just started to hike, and it's kind of just a nomad out in the forest like for the last few years. So this guy interviewed him and said, like, what changed your mind, and like, what have you learned since then, and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I'm not in any rush to to jump in here on book number 3. Book number, I would say the velocity of information was 3,000 hours of my time, 3,000 hours from outlining to, again, final edits and everything, 3,000 hours. And for me, it's not a linear process, and that was a shorter timeline. I really held my feet to the fire to make sure that this came out close to the pandemic, right? It's a difficult process for me. I'm very good at conceptualizing. I'm a big ideas person. When I put things and start writing, I have to keep going back, and so like when you read the books and things are really good, right? Because I work with my editors, I go back so many times and I'm reading things and we're doing transitions, but I'm like really kind of takes a lot out there. So but yeah, I do think there is something to in that genre, though, of this finite voltage of how do you walk it back. Let's talk about people who have walked right up to the cusp of, whether it be self-harm or the cusp of a dangerous situation where, whatever. And then how do you walk back from that and kind of return and function, right? Without having that permanently change. I mean, it's always going to be with you, right? But permanently change you to the point where you can't function effectively anymore in society and stuff like that. So I honestly don't know enough about this. I know the idea is valid. That whole premise for a book is valid, that finite voltage. I'm not sure how to approach it. So yeah, put ideas out there. It's great. Should be one, share real life thoughts with the book characters. So yeah. And so this is the thing. So this is a question. If you go with a traditional publisher, so like Velocity of Information will be an internationally released book, as School of Airs was. So like right now, if you type it in, like bookstores in Japan and Hungary and France and UK and Australia and stuff. So like I have to make a decision if I'm going to write more of a either a fiction or a biographical book, and I'm not going to have like citations. Publishers aren't going to go for that. At least the stuff that I do. Like, I'm traditionally like a very strong scholarly nonfiction person, and they know that, and that helps them and it helps me. But so I would have to make a decision. If I wrote this, I'm likely not going to have that type of a contract for it and the distribution for it. I don't know, or maybe I could. I just, and the other thing is, I'm telling you, like, when someone says like I'm writing a book and stuff like that, like, it is pretty intense and crazy. It is a big chunk of your life. Professionally, the books were more consuming than my PhD by far. They were more consuming than my job. The velocity of information, massive. Just a massive commitment to that book, which I'm very proud of. But I don't know. I mean, I don't have a lot of that left in me right now. Hiring Jack Napier. I haven't actually. So I do have through the publishing house, we do have a professional editor, a professional narrator, who is a prominent television actor, and so it's a very significant narrator. Not that Jack is insignificant, right? I don't want to say that, but that is already in place and put together. So yeah, I like Jack. So TJ Play Nice, be safe, have fun, carry your guns, rock. Everyone looks at TJ Play Nice is out here. I have some ideas for you being so actually, Dark, that would be interesting. If we had a long discussion to kind of think of where things might go, because when you were talking with, was it Diesel TV and sharing when you were coming into Washington, what DC area and some of that stuff, I was thinking that's book material. What Dark is talking about right now, like that is book material. And yeah, let's, if you're up for it sometime, maybe let's have a discussion on that and see what that might look like for, for a book. So, and the GoFundMe for the truckers, that's awesome. And I hope there's like legal in there to make sure that gets distributed appropriately, right? That there isn't some injunction. Wasn't the city of Ottawa trying to say, we're going to take the money for the expenses of protecting the city? That's garbage. Ottawa is scared. Justin Trudeau is scared right now. They are afraid. And it's interesting too, because they're afraid, and these people aren't out to do them harm. These people are out to express their beliefs on freedom, right? They're not. So, but it's so. Bacon wrote, from my experience of finding self-deletion is attempted in a moment after months, if not years of torment. So, yeah. And I think, there's a lot of ways to look at that. So you could look at, Germany after World War II, when, the Russians were coming into Germany, and people would be like, there were a large number of people, civilians, that took their own lives. Because they didn't want to interface with whatever was going to happen with the Russians coming in. So yeah, I don't know how I want to frame that book. Like, I don't want to necessarily frame it as a suicide book. I don't think that's where I want to go with it. But there's a lot to be learned. And I think Dark is his life story is one example of this. Is there's a lot to be learned from coming up to the edge of questions of, if you make one decision, it will change your life and lives around you forever, and that will never return. And then when you walk back from that finite voltage point, because I think there's going to be power if I do it right. You're going to read this and there's going to be power, because you're going to see your own struggles in some of these stories, or some of the ways that I would do that. And you'd be able to have some perspective on, okay, people have felt this way before. And that's sometimes too, I think people think like they're what they're experiencing is something other people haven't experienced and found resilience and recovery. So I don't know. Um, as I said, after going through all of the stuff with this book, and by the way, I do have this is my stamp for the book. So let's just see. I'm going to try this right now. So I had the stamp made from this place in Ohio that made a stamp for my other book, which is awesome, but the stamp was too big. And the problem with that is, let me make a stamp here. The problem with the book, or problem with the stamp with School of Airs, is if you got a book from me and I had the stamp, it was really awesome, but it took time because it was so big. Like I had so this one is smaller. So let me show you what the stamp looks like. And here it is. So there it is up on the camera. So that's an ink stamp in blue, so it matches the cover. So signed by the author, the velocity information human thinking during cat times, and then my name. And then I would just sign it, on that same page. But then if you get a book from me, right, or an author event, it'll have the stamp, which is kind of cool. So that's an idea that I learned about. And PhD is kind of an interesting thing too, because PH.D. is kind of falling out of favor. That's kind of old school, but yet like some people still use it. And I tend to like be more old school. So I use it, but like some places where my stuff shows up, it's like PhD without the periods after the PH and the D. So I kind of stick with that old school style. Like when I actually present on PBS, I use a 3-button sport coat because it's more formal. It's kind of my style, but so yeah, I mean, the ink stamp's pretty cool. I like it. So I observed Canadians' bolo have been tormented for at least 2 years. The truckers are right. Enough is enough. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, come on. I mean, G23, they want freedom just like Americans do. It's pretty amazing what's happening with the truck drivers. And I think it's going to be essential for, the drivers themselves to document and to try to get out, social media streams, so the narratives don't get worked against them. But yeah, just in general, like Ed, we talked about this last week on the show with Jonathan Berger. Truckers have been treated horribly for years, but during the pandemic, they were deemed essential and then just like kind of just told, do your job. And we closed waysides down, and truckers didn't have places to go to the bathroom, places to eat, shower, do laundry, all that stuff. And, when Jonathan and I were talking last week, I said, that should have been every state National Guard should have had X number of waysides staffed and open. And you could have, as a trucker, you go there and you could, and they were still finding truckers who were stopping. There's not enough places for truckers to park, by the way. That's been a long standing problem. But during the pandemic, truckers might park in an area they're not supposed to park because there isn't anywhere else. And they eliminated they just said drive, and then they give them a $200 ticket. So just all this garbage stuff. Like I'm pro trucker, and that last show, I'm still behind this brown bag brigade. I think we should have it's not sufficient, right? But at least something. Communities, this campaign where we have a brown bag, like the old style grocery bag, kind of bigger, and you put in it as Jonathan Berger said, like a pair of socks, soup, like maybe someone 3D prints like a diffuser that fits on your air vents, Gatorade, and a thank you card, and it could be like 10 different things, and they don't have to all be the same. And maybe you decorate the bag up like kids decorate these in schools or community groups or Lions Club or whatever. And then as truckers are coming in, or waysides or truck stations or truck stops or whatever, you give one of these bags, right? And again, it's grossly insufficient, but it's something where there's nothing right now. And But or yeah, plastic utensils was another thing that Jonathan Berger talked about. But so many of these things, right? That would be pretty, I wouldn't say easy to do, but not hard to do. That could be readily coordinated, and also that these states would have designated areas. Why was it in the spring of 2020 states didn't open their county fairgrounds for truckers to have a place to stay overnight, right? Or to have them stop in and give them a warm meal and whatever, a place to shower and stuff like that. Like, how did we not do that as a society? And how was it not government kind of led, or at least like state level led or somewhere? Like, how was that? Like, where I live is right off an interstate. We're the county seat. We have the county fairgrounds is right there. And it's, in spring, there's nothing there to say you could have a capacity for, I don't know, 50, 75, 100 rigs. People would have brought things down. There were restaurants. I mean, I don't know. It's perplexing to me that people don't think about that. So tyranny is supposed to be fought by the military, not our great truckers. It's going to be interesting, Shinobi. One, because if push comes to shove with the truckers, like let's say Trudeau or the Ottawa, president or the elected officials say, now it's a public safety thing because roads are blocked. The military has to clear the roads. Would they do that? Or because like a lot of the videos I saw, the truck drivers are going down and the police, fire trucks, ambulance, emergency services, they were on the side of the roads, like with signs and banners and then the lights on, like, yeah, go for it. So that's the thing. Like, I think if you were to say, military, you need to, intervene and move these people out of here, I'm not sure that they would do that. And I would say I'm much more confident that local governments would say, forget it. We're not going to do that. We're holding up the signs like, so this is potentially historical significant in our lifetime and for years. Yeah. And that's one thing about the velocity of information. So in the velocity of information, when I decided to write that book, it was in the spring of 2020 as the pandemic was happening, right? As our trip to Disney got canceled and everything. Like, I was like, this is so big. Like, I'm going to start writing now while this is happening. And I'm going to write what I'm experiencing as this is happening. How I'm getting my information and how this is impacting me and my family and stuff like that. So the book is phenomenal because it's not this like retrospect historical. You're trying to go back and gather information that was in vivo in the moment. But as you said, like right now, like there's a book to be written about this. Wouldn't it be fascinating for someone who is up in Canada to be going kind of from truck to truck, with a camcorder, right? Or an audio recorder and saying, why are you doing this or whatever? And tell me, and what's your experiences and, 15 minutes and move on to the next truck and move on. And then you put that in, timestamp it. And oh my God. So it's pretty, Bacon wrote to Shinobi one. Someone has to kick things off. The military can already get involved once the government sells splinters. Examples of a war. The established military we weren't supposed to have, at least. Yeah. So, yeah. Gas vouchers. Yeah. And gas being distributed by, remember the movie, what was it, with Emilio Estevez and the trucks that were taken over by meteor or something, and the trucks themselves trying to kill the people. Maximum Overdrive, is that what it's called? That was a freaky movie. I remember watching it as a kid. I was like, oh my God. So truck drivers should just go on a work strike. So I think the truck drivers have a lot of power, and I've been, of course, in the media, right? Like, we see very little or hear very little about this. So that's where the truckers need to keep producing video and getting it out to people and having people circulate that video, because the mainstream media is completely shutting this down, or anything that's coming out is largely not putting the truckers in a good light on this. So yeah, but let's see. Bolo, if Atlas shrugs, people will suffer. Yeah, the truckers are for freedom, not suffering. Right. And that's where I think we're going to have a world society have to watch, how this unfolds in the next 24 to 48 hours. Is there going to be something that's going to be said, oh, the truckers did this? There was some emergency event and we couldn't get resources because the truckers are blocking the road, or the truckers turned violent. And I believe the truckers are, peaceful. They're expressing their, their intent very clearly here. So it's a matter of the YouTube, and I think a lot of YouTube streams have been hit and taken down, right? For putting anything out there with the truckers right now, but people can observe indicators. People know what's going on around them, and I think you're going to see this. People are going to be bringing food out to the truckers, right? Kind of this whole brown bag brigade we talked about, but maybe at a more massive level. They're going to be hauling things out to the truckers, and so I think it's fascinating to see. I support the truckers. G23, they have lots of YouTubers documenting this. Lots of people are handing out food. Yeah, awesome. Absolutely awesome. So people are revolting to the government. The government then arrives. We're here to help the people. If you're messing things up, more government arrives. We're here to help you up. And doesn't it seem, Shinobi One, like right now, people are sensing like, though, that they know the truckers are in the right? Because they feel it, like they understand it, and they know the truckers are, peacefully and appropriately demonstrating. And so I think there's a strong. I actually wouldn't be surprised if like Trudeau resigns or something like that happens. I thought the fact that he left was really bizarre. I mean, just personally, I think. So, whoa, okay. I just got to notice that my connection is not that good. I've never had that before on the show. Could it be the topic we're talking about? I am on a hardwired setup here. Now it says connection's unstable. I think, guys, we're being censored. We're being censored. Yes. I've got my other systems all monitored here. We are being censored. So think about that. Interesting. He led the mainstream news today. It was no mention of Ottawa, right? There are people who have U-Haul trucks with boxes of bags of food for the truckers, everyone involved in the shutdown. There's going to be strong support, and it's going to be ongoing for the truckers. So, wow. So I don't know if it came through on your side. I got the notification here. I was being my stream is yeah. Wow. Okay. This is interesting. This isn't. I'm sure, right? I'm sure they've got it nailed into keywords and things like that, and so okay. Anyway, so we're thanks 5 for 5. Good. So yeah, suddenly the stream will just end. So I'm safe. I'm down here in the bunker, but so anyway, the book comes out on April 11th. So we're down to like 9 weeks before the book is released. So it's exciting. Again, everything is done with the proofing. What I've had to do now is start to finalize things with the narrator, which it's new for me because School of Errors was not narrated. And then it's a talking point. So I have a 2-page talking point document. And then I share that out with some people. And some people are like, this is helpful. But other people are like, it's still pretty complicated, like the terms and stuff. So like, can you like boil it down into maybe some quotes or like a couple points? And that's where I changed up some things. And I'm like the press release, when we were working on that, the AP press release, in the first paragraph, like this is more centered as a mental health book. It's a big buzz term, and like people understand mental health, or at least they think they do. But if you kind of frame it as this is a book to help your mental health, people are like, okay, now I get it. So that's been the pivot. And then there's some things I've added in this 2-page document. And one is that Dr. Seuss, Dr. Theodore Seuss Geisel, was in World War II. He worked with the U.S. military. He wasn't the doctor thing is just given to him by university. It's not a doctor. He's not a PhD or MD, but he was working on propaganda, but he was also working with the same group of psychiatrists who figured out that if you give troops breaks, if you rotate your troops, kind of these tours, instead of just like once you're in, if you're at the front, you just stay there. Like, you'd rotate people out, that you wouldn't hit finite voltage. People wouldn't burn out. So anyway, Seuss was kind of a part of that. And then also this whole thing with imaging, like show more images, visuals. Remember we had the whole thing come up with pinup art during World War II, like your handles on your pistols, like where pinup art was on, stuff like that too. But and people don't know that, right? People don't know, they Dr. Seuss, like Cat in a Hat, or there's a mouse in my house or whatever. Curious George and high voltage fence, stuff like that. But Dr. Seuss actually did, was a big part of World War II propaganda. So it's kind of something's mentioned in the book too. So yeah, it is. So it's exciting. What happens now is the calendar starts to fill up, because when the book is released, there'll be interviews with, different size media, but they already are starting to contact and say, hey, like we know the book is coming out. Can we schedule an interview for April 13th at whatever? Yeah, we can do that. And then like, here's like the talking points document. And so I know I'll do a lot of media interviews for about 2 weeks, and then start to do some more in-person book author events. And, then things will, just kind of take it from there. Right. Like it's just going to, it just saturates out into the media. And all depends kind of what's happening at that time too. If there are other mental health things that are kind of happening, this might resonate a little bit stronger. But so let's check the chat here. So brothers, Bolo +1 to you. Blessings upon us all, to the chat, and as both, may the creator protect. So Shinobi1, thank you. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And shamelessly, I'm asking all of you, subscribe from your multiple YouTube channels, all your aliases. Yeah, man. So let's see here. Okay, so let's do this like the sub. Dun-dun-dun. And again, this is the cover. Well, that's the cover of the audiobook. So let's get that out of there. Let's get the cover of not the real book. The audiobook is a real book, but God, there's I just have to take a snapshot of kind of all of these things here. So where proofs, cover design, what the hell? So, all right, let's do this. So that's the cover of the book right there. And let's make it bigger. Da-da-da. So let's cover the book. So again, they had multiple covers that they put together for the book. And then ultimately, this was the one that I picked, although they had numerous people review covers, and there were different criteria, like if you saw this book, would you be likely to pick it up? If you're scrolling through your phone, and we had different cover options, like which ones would catch your attention, which ones are too busy. So there's a lot of stuff that goes in the cover. And then also colors. Like I initially thought red would be a good color for this book, but there's too much that's been going on, like with scary and trying to frighten you. And say, hey, we have 14 likes. If we could get more likes up there, I'd appreciate that. So right, Bacon, more likes. Um, so yeah, we talked about it, and the color scheme, blue is a color which conveys trust and kind of like knowledge and confidence. So that was one of the purposes of changing to blue. And the other reason we went with this is that the light, speed of light, right, comes off of the side, and it removes this whole thing. Is this a gender? No, it's just a brain, right? But because it comes off the side of the cover, it fits well with the theme of the book. So numerous things that came into deciding that this would be the copy. Um, but yeah, I didn't design the cover of the book. Like, I had, I was working with the marketing team early on and kind of had some ideas. And then they would say, like, here are 100 pictures. Like, what are 5 that you think might convey what the book conveys? And this actually wasn't one of the pictures that I selected, but then they worked up the cover drafts, and I think gave me 5. And I mean, I could have asked for more, but this one really stood out. And then it ranked the highest with their committee too. So, but yeah, so please sub. So, and let's see here. So Bacon's saying, do you have your book tour scheduled already? So, kind of. It gets thrown for a wrench if I get voted into political office. Because, yeah, if that happens, then my commitment, my obligations change, and my tours would change, like how I would do this. So I'm not really sure. And there's other things I need to work alongside with the tour. And because I'm a university professor, kind of the best setup for me is if I can, like, present at a university, right, or a library, and some of that has to do with tax purposes and stuff like that. But it's a little more nimble. And as states are still real quirky with how they're handling their pandemic stuff, like, to do a hard commitment is kind of dangerous at this time. So the short answer to that is I have an idea. It probably isn't going to be expansive as it was before, just because I can't trust that these places will say, yeah, doc, we're going to have an author event, and we're going to advertise it, and then before 2 weeks before I'm supposed to go down there, right, mostly down because I'm in Wisconsin, they say, oh, we now have new mandates for social distancing and we're shutting these things down. So Shinobi One said, I won't judge a book by a cover, but by the content of your character, which I clearly see. Well, thank you, Shinobi One. So appreciate that. So I like the cover too. I think it's cool. It's much different than my first cover also, but I like the cover. It's a cool book. It's a good book. Shinobi One Docs, so people know for you. Yeah, thanks, Bacon. Solitude, I subbed and have your book. Thanks. Yeah, you contacted me, Solitude, a while back on School Bears. So I know you're a fan of that, and I think you'll be a fan of the Velocity of Information. And there are a lot of stories in this, right? And I speak to you, the reader. It's not this technical book. It's not. You're going to feel as you go through this. And that's why I think you'll love the audiobook when it's out there too. But you will. I'm talking to you. We're having this discussion, as we go through the book. It's really a cool style to write. I think some of the reviewers said it's like a Malcolm Gladwell style. And yeah, I have read it so many times, right? Having to do all the different things I do with the book. But I think that is something that's going to stick out to you. Like, and you're going to remember things. You're going to be, if someone's like, oh, like, what is finite voltage? Oh, it's like a 90 days, like people burn out. Or like, hey, tell me the story about the crab boat guy. Oh yeah, okay, so he was doing this, and like, these refrigerator sized chunks of ice would fly across and like hit people and kill them. And so how about Morgan Rogue? Like, what was she talking about of trying, what was her story? Oh yeah, it was like really hard. She's a survivalist, but like she couldn't find like a sewing kit, like during the pandemic. So like, the things that you got to think about. So I, it's really, these core concepts are brought out through these personal stories. It's really good. It's really good. Um, Glad to hear. We all need to have good men. We have to have a hope for a brighter future. So yeah, it's a good thing. So I would say the book. So the book has a dichotomy toward the end. The book also has an antagonist, and I did that in School of Errors too. Like I have one chapter in School of Errors where I'm citing someone who doesn't necessarily agree with me. Like, and I think that's the strength when you do nonfiction, is to put in a position that that doesn't necessarily align with what you have. So it's not saying I'm wrong, but I'm saying there are different ways to analyze this. So in the velocity of information, I have an antagonist chapter in there where someone I interviewed has a position that's different than mine. So, which you're thinking like, why would you do that in a book where you're writing this? But it adds credibility to the book, just as it did in School of Errors. It adds credibility to bring in an antagonist perspective into the book. Now, if you overdo it, then things kind of fall apart. But if you have it in there, I think it shows that you're not cherry picking what you're putting into this book. And yes, people can frame these things out in different ways. So the antagonist is definitely in there, and it's kind of I mean, there's a skill to writing the book too. So there's a intro chapter in it where we get into the wildfires that happen in Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, and how physical time kind of collapses, right? Things are happening really fast. And the chapter, when you analyze the chapter, you look at it, I went through and I wrote the chapter, and then I broke it into very short paragraphs, very short. So as you read the chapter itself moves very fast. And it's by design, because I made the paragraphs very short. Maybe like some paragraphs are one sentence. You won't notice it when you get to it. There's nothing off with it, like visually you'd see, but it forces you to read the book, that chapter, at a fast pace. And I did that on purpose, right? I strategically went in and did that. And there are certain words that I will use in back-to-back sentences. And I don't like to do that. If it's a key word, I want to change it up, because I don't like the feel of when a book reuses words, descriptive words. But if you do that, like I do it in here, there's a reason I do that. It's to really drive home that concept. And it's very rare. So when I do it, it should stand out. But believe it or not, there's an art to laying out your paragraphs and how long your paragraphs are. And so when the whole book was done, I mean, I went back and spent a lot of time on paragraph length, and also understanding, like, do I want this to be a fast chapter, or do I want to be a chapter where people can sink things in? Do I want to end? I had some chapters where I introduced bullet points at the end of main segments, like 3 bullet points as a summary. And it's kind of my style. I did that in Velocity or School of Errors, but in Velocity of Information, there are a number of areas where you'll stop and you'll get to these bullet points, and it'll be like, Nikolai's 3 lessons from whatever, Chernobyl. And I do that to break things up for the reader and make sure that the reader understands, like, here's exactly what I was hoping you'd get out of this. And you probably got it, but if you didn't, like, here's a reiteration. And then, how you work with the indexer. I don't, making sure the indexer is having the main theme, stuff like that. But the writing style, though, is interesting. And I picked that up. Like, I learned it after School of Errors, how to visually present things and how to short sentences, long sentences. And I mean, maybe it sounds a little bit crazy, but the Gatlinburg chapter is all extremely short sentences that you'll never pick up on unless I told you right now. But as you read that chapter will be the fastest chapter you'll read in the book, because of the way it's designed. It's meant to be fast. It's meant to put you in the mindset of being on the mountain as the fire's happening, and you have to find your way down as your cell communications are gone, your Garmin, your GPS, everything's gone. It's all smoke. It's coming in through your air vents. And like so like you're there. It's like the never ending story. Like you're there as with me, like as I'm leading you through it. And you're the one I'm leading down this mountain. You can get that clearly from this, even though like there's these people who are interviewed who are coming down. You're the one that I'm bringing down this mountain. And like one of my professional reviewers said, I think if someone would have had a heart rate monitor on me as I'm reading this chapter, it would have gone up. I was feeling anxious, and as I'm going through this, like it's rolling me down this chapter, rolling me down this hill and these flames, and the chapter is moving so fast, and I'm like, that's what it was designed to do. I completely structured that chapter, physically built that chapter, that as a reader you wouldn't be able to take a break. And so it's a skill. Like you don't want to do it too much, because it's not it's like keeping your reader on a roller coaster. Like they'll puke eventually, be like, "Bleh!" You don't want that. But there is like, it's really cool, and it worked. And then I went back to some people afterwards, and then I brought it up and said, hey, like I specifically did it this way. Like I didn't tell people ahead of time, but then some people would say like, whoa. So let's see here. So this is from Clyde 510. So Clyde, you're new, I think. If you are, please subscribe. What is a good way to get faster at things besides repetition? So, wow. I think for me personally, well, there's this whole, task analysis. What can I cut out, right? And what can I try to, I try to do an agenda. Like for years I've done this at the start of the day of like, what do I want to accomplish, and kind of check it off from there. But it's a good point. I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to that. What's a good way to get faster besides repetition? I guess in Velocity of Information, I have a chapter about attention. Linda Stone. I interviewed Linda Stone, who was the vice president of Microsoft. And, Linda worked on the attention project. What causes people to lose attention or maintain attention, right? When they started to build the first search engines out for the internet, the thought was if you had more than 10 results come back on a search, people would tune out. They'd be like, this is too much. It overwhelms me. So making sure, one of the things, what's a good way to get faster is, I guess, decreasing stimuli in your environment. I mean, that's probably pretty proven. For example, like if you can do a phone call with someone, do a phone call instead of video call. But I don't know. I have to think about that one. This is Bolo. Keeping freedom feels like a fight. The truckers' actions brought tear to my eye. Heard them cry too. I think it's very sincere for the truckers. And I think this is a big moment for Canada and for America and for the world. And, just going into last week, that was one of the most research shows that I did. And also I had a really strong feeling as I did that show of like, truckers are not being treated appropriately. And truckers are also, this is before, I guess the last week of what's happened in Canada, but I'm like, it's a mirror to how society is treating its essential workers and kind of treating itself. And then there's this weird positionality, like these big rigs, right? These huge structures, which are imposing. And it kind of counters, we had those type of structures in the healthcare parades, right? So it's not in my book. Healthcare parades are in my book. Like, you bring out $1 million fire engine, this big piece of equipment. It's kind of this government positionality, right? That is in your face. And now it's kind of this positionality, but it's not necessarily government. It's like the people's positionality, like a semi truck. I mean, let's face it. Like if you have a semi truck versus like somebody standing with a sign that says, people's rights or something, the person isn't going to get as much attention as this big semi. So the positionality, and government is huge, right? Government. So now you have things that are kind of rivaling this in positionality, which is very interesting. Shinobi One said, it's not, I'm wrong. It's, there is no right. So, yeah. Um, Bacon to Andrew. Cheers. I guess it's out of here. Clyde, define faster. Trying to save time. I want to get better at simplifying. Yeah, I'd have to, I'd have to think about that and actually probably put a show together on that. Um, with writing the book, for example, because this was my second book under contract and I knew I had a tight timeline on it of like what, 7, 8 months. Um, I built out all of the folders in, my Google Docs folders. And I had a calendar that I printed, and I knew when I had certain things I wanted to get done by certain dates. And this whole thing was always in motion. Like multiple things were in motion at once. Like things were being transcribed, interviews were being transcribed as I was going through, as I was working with marketing. And um, so I'm just a very visual and graphics type of person. And I think anything you can take in audio, if you're able to do that, like audiobook and things like that too, is valuable. But I don't know. I would say I was very efficient with this book, but I would have to sit down and actually analyze the efficiencies that I built into this, because it's still this very fresh, wrought process. Media Hits. Hey, it's Media Hits. Have you visited the Mad Dog and Merrill Grill store in Walworth, Wisconsin? Potential cross-marketing gold. I have not. Walworth. Where is Walworth, Wisconsin? I've heard of that. Walworth. Jesus. All right. Population 2816. Where is it here? It's right on the border of between Illinois and Wisconsin. So no, Walworth. So from where I live, that is probably a 2-hour drive. So Mad Dog and Merrill Grill Store in Walworth. Interesting. I have not. They have been doing their cooking show for a while, going to tailgate parties. God, I'd love to get down there. Oh, I'd love to do like a good tailgate. Define faster, getting to the point and not getting distracted. So yeah, I think so. When I wrote that chapter, for example, the purpose of the chapter was to try to make so when you have short sentences, you read them faster. And I also made the sentences shorter, right? So there are some techniques that when people approach context when they approach text, shorter sentences, and then also the sentences themselves are shorter. And then I cut out a lot of citations. I didn't do many citations in that chapter at all. So like, and the citations number are just numbers. It's Chicago styling at the end of a sentence or something. But I didn't do any block quotes. So as you read it was a fast read. And then I think the content too was really this crescendo. Like it starts out and it talks about these two brothers who are up on top of the hill in Pigeon Forge, and fire starts, and then they got to get the hell down, and everything's all smoke. It's dark, and the fire burns through the fiber optics, so they don't have any cell communications, and visuals real sketchy. And they find this old guy in the middle of the road who just stopped. He kind of gave up, and they're like, "Follow us like our taillights." But again, it's structurally designed to move very fast. Short sentences, short paragraphs, and no block quotes, very few citations. And then just the whole thing is building to an end, right? Like the whole chapter is kind of like, are these guys going to get down the hill? So it's interesting. Plus, like it's not a narrative, like it's citing actual events that happen. So it's a nonfiction book, but it's really well done. And I felt the same thing. Like I had a visceral feeling when I read that chapter of like, oh my God, like, come on, get down the hill. Like, you're running out of time. And, and as these like propane tanks would explode as they're going by, and they would like, waft smoke inside of their vehicle. You could hear the concussive wave would come through the metal. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things like I think I've got it, and then I have my team of member checks or reviewers, right? That go through it and again, these people are told to one, does it make sense? Is one second, is it a conspiracy at all? Like, do you have a sense that this is going down a conspiracy? Because I can't publish a nonfiction book that goes in that route. Is it political, overtly political? And then I don't know. Did you find it entertaining and that you'd be able to retell it? I think those are like my 4 questions I had. But and one of my reviewers was kind of an antagonist, wasn't necessarily like a big fan of mine. But you have to do that if you want authentic feedback. Like I knew this person was very good at what they did. I knew this probably wasn't exactly their cup of tea, but they would objectively either tell me this is good or this is bad, or your objective is no political leanings or whatever. That's where you have to kind of take your ego and put it as, because I had one chapter I wrote and it wasn't good. And I knew even after I like worked on it, I'm like, I don't know. And like this, like, there were chapters that didn't make it in here and all this stuff. This is like, a really good refined product, right? But when I sent that chapter out, I had most of the people in my member check my reviewers like said it's a good chapter and stuff like that. But some people are like, no, it's not good. I know you're off in this chapter. I'm like, well, that's what I need to hear, because I don't think it's a good chapter either. So then I had to go back and with everybody and just say, I don't think it's a good chapter, but I can't tell you that at the start, because then you're going to, I need you to objectively look at all these chapters. I can't have you get caught up in like, I'm a fan of David's work and of David's stuff like this. So, I want everything to be positive. I don't want to tell him anything bad. I'm like, if something is in here that doesn't make sense, or this has a weird feel to it or whatever, this chapter, like you just have to tell me. And that one, I think I ripped all apart and put it back together and fixed it. So it's a good chapter now. But it was really, I was just like, I'm done with it. Like I need people to just kind of get a feel, and that's it. But it's a good thing also to kind of have like a bad chapter to test people. And if people come back and say, it's great, be like, oh, you're not objective anymore. This is from Bacon to Clyde. Aside from repetition, learning from mistakes and becoming more efficient depends on what you're doing as well. One field might not coincide with the other. Yeah, I think you learn. I have a diagram in the book too, which actually let me try to bring up, which is, I had this one commissioned. But the book is talking about chaos, right? So it's like, how do you function during chaos, and how do you function well during chaos? How do you get it ahead of the curve, out of harm's way, and how do you stay there? So I have an image here, which is, here it is. Here it is. Okay. This image is in the book, and let's take a look at it. So right here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is explain this image to you. So on the left-hand side is the quality of high-stakes decisions. So the title of this is Skill Development and Decision-Making in High-Stress Environments. And what I'm trying to convey here is, so let's say you're in a high-stress, a chaos environment. And maybe an example, I'll use the crab boat guy, Robert Travis. So when Robert Travis started out as a crab boater in Bering Sea in Alaska, right? He started down here. He didn't know much, but so the dotted is skill level. So how his skills got on the boat and his decision making. So they both went up pretty sharp here the first 30 days. And you see that, like you would see the statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, like the first 30 days on a crab boat, very high probability of getting maimed or killed. But after that, you got pretty good at what you're doing. Like you understand how the boat works, the machinery, stuff like that. So you kind of continue on this path here where your skills get better and your decision making gets better. But then at about 70 days, 75 days, right around here, there's something that happens. And this is whether it's crab boaters, whether it's special forces, whatever, in extended chaos events. Your skills continue to get better, but your decision making starts to fall off. And what happens is you just think, I know this, like I know how to handle this. The thing is, the job isn't any less dangerous at 75 days. But yeah, people start to fall off and make bad decisions, lackadaisical decisions. So just something to know, like you're going to have this big increase, and then like your sweet spot is like that 30 to 75 days. Like you're going to be getting better at what you do. You're going to be making good decisions. And then suddenly your decision making is just going to fall off a cliff. So that this is one of the images in the book. So yeah, it's like we don't handle extended periods of chaos well. Now, if we're cognizant, if we're thinking about, if we understand things like this, we're much better off, but just most people aren't. They just don't tune into that. So, so let's see here. This is from Shinobi One. Brother Clyde 510. I want to pro or look at the best people in the field. That's how I get better. I use others' knowledge the best. I think you're right on. Like exemplars is what you're talking about, which the book is. So the Velocity of Information is really a book of exemplars. That's really good. Like I have to include that somewhere in a note. Exemplars are examples that you want to follow. And for example, yours as a school administrator and stuff, I'd be like, if you want kids to do things a certain way, like write paragraphs a certain way or whatever, like show them examples and say, like, this is what I want you to do, instead of like having them kind of guess, like, what do you want me to do? And watch people who know how to do things really well. So yeah, you're right on. Like those are the exemplars. So Shinobi One is correct. Try to find people that do things really well. And that's like, right, if you're, you hire a coach, or I remember like when I was bowling, and like a bowling instructor like was teaching me how to like throw a curve, something like that. It's basically, yeah, someone either who does it really well or someone that can coach you in that area. Clyde wrote, do, for example, I come from a line of general construction, so I know a little bit about everything, it's great, right? So you have a lot of knowledge going in there. So, and some of it, right, is just trial and error and trying things. I don't know if that's so much in Velocity of Information, but I learned a lot. When we moved into this house 20 years ago, it was a fixer-upper. Had good bones, but it needed a lot of work. And so like I learned how to make doors and stuff like that, which are still in the house today and really good and stuff. And I'm like, because I kind of figured out how to do it, like, saw some YouTube videos or, whatever, and made a couple and just got better at it. So part of it is just kind of like trial and error. Like I learned some things. And Bacon wrote to Clyde, there's no easy hack. Learning to focus, you're going to have to practice it until it's ingrained. So, yep. And so in Velocity of Information, right, you're going to find so much information coming at us today and so quickly curated directly to us. So remember when we got the things, the emails and stuff from the companies, hey, like it's Calvin Klein, we're here with you. You placed an order with them 5 years ago, and you're in their system. And those are coming out in April. So how fast information comes to us on our phones is really wiping us out. It's called this wet bulb effect, which I'll spend time on in a specific podcast. I wrote about it in the book, chapter Wet Bulb Effect. But it's basically where you have so much information around you, it saturates you wherever you go. And the term wet bulb, imagine if it's really humid outside, right? And you go outside, if you sweat, like it doesn't really do any good because your sweat's not going and evaporating. You just like keep overheating. So there is this thing of wet bulb, right? If you just continually put yourself in situations where all this information is coming to you, whether it's family information or bad news or stuff like that, it gets to the point where you can't kind of evaporate it off, right? It just totally saturates you. And once you get to that point, you're pretty much cooked. like that's all you experience is this wet bulb effect. So this is, hey, Aaron Clary, my good friend Aaron Clary, who also is from Wisconsin. He was smart enough to get out. I stayed. So that was the deal. Wisconsin would only let one of us out. I said, Aaron, let it be you. So yes, my good friend Aaron Clary. So yeah, and a little joke there with so Aaron you could buy all of his podcasts when it was maybe like 6 years ago. So when I found his show, and you could mail him, I think it was like $20, and he would send you a thumb drive with all of his shows. At that time, I don't know, maybe like 300. Now he's got like thousands. But so you send this PO box number where he used to live, like in Minnesota, and then one day I got this envelope, and it was all mangled and ripped, like, because you could tell it went through the device at the post office, got all cut up. And he had this, I might have it. Let me check here. No. He had this cheap, this cheap orange thumb drive, which was all bent up. It's plastic thing. It wasn't broken though, and it did work. Like I put it in, I was able to get all the stuff down. But yeah, so you must have bought like a sack of these things for, whatever, a 500 megabyte thumb drive for 75 cents in bulk. But I was like, dude, like this thing barely made it to my house. Like the envelope was all ripped up and thing was all like bent, and I had to get it in the USB. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. Bacon wrote, that's 100% correct. Complacency kills. I've done things behind the wheel others would have died trying to, let alone super illegal without a scratch. Every accident of mine was just commuting. So yeah, and I think people, so as we go back to this or this, people don't acknowledge, right? Because we really haven't been in chaos. Or, I mean, people can be in personal chaos, which is important, right? If you are dealing with someone, a family member or a friend who is in a chaos situation, lost a job, homeless, somebody who is terminally ill, a number of things. And okay, like let's say like right down here, this is like a cancer diagnosis, right? And then with, someone in the family, and then like you continue to understand, cancer and build resilience and stuff like that. And you might, understand things more, but there's going to be this kind of, this breaking point where you're not going to be as objective with your decision making, things like that. That extended chaos, I mean, manifest, and so it's this thing, and this newness too. There's this, I wrote about it, and there's this definite part of when something bad happens or unusual or chaos or crisis, there is this like week or two where we feel really kind of excited. And I don't want to say that in a way like a happy, but we feel all this newness and this energy, and it really drives us. So there's a lot of things you can do during that time, and then it kind of wanes after that. But there is this certain excitement. I mean, if you can think about it, like, if there's tonight, if there was a fire down the block from you, I mean, there'd be this kind of initial excitement of all of, the fire engines, the apparatus, everything that's going on. And, that would be kind of this initial energy that comes in. So there is this excitement that comes with this chaos. And that's something too, like one of the first reactions of chaos is typically excitement. People don't think about that. So yeah. Bolo, our good friend who has his device, which is logging hours. Thank you. Laugh out loud. Easy as that is. Safety Doc. Hey, this is John Steele. Congratulations on your success. Our good friend John Steele from the state of Washington. You are a hardworking, highly intelligent man who deserves the recognition you receive. Well, I appreciate that. And John Steele was a guest on my show. So we talked about escaping Seattle. That was a great show. So, yep, that's on the Safety Doc podcast. So yeah, John Steele. Well, I appreciate it. I think I'm writing School of Airs was a big accomplishment. because I'd never written a book under contract before and presented about it and everything. Yeah, it went on to be its own PBS presentation, stuff like that. But the velocity of information is more meaningful because it's kind of like the second time it was on PBS. Like the first time was great, right? But the thing is, like, can you do it a second time, and can you keep it up? Can it have the same or better energy? Like, it's like Super Bowl. Can you win back to back? Can you win like two? And so, like, when I returned to PBS and had another terrific presentation, I was like, whoa, it was really good. And when I was able to like approach this book, which School of Errors is pretty focused, like that's school safety. Now, when you kind of broaden out into crisis and chaos, and is my publisher going to stick with me on this? And is this going to make sense? And to have it all come together and done, I was like, whoa, this is really big. And so, yeah, personally, it's big. I think and people that follow my work, it's going to be great. And for my kids, I mean, it's really, it's a big thing. My youngest daughter mentioned the book again tonight. I don't talk about it a lot with my kids. They know the book, and like I've been on TV quite a bit, so they'll say like, oh, my teacher like saw you on TV or something like that. And I was on like TV, I think in Iowa a couple of weeks ago. I don't know, not Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, but I think it's good for them, right, to also see that you take something and understand you can create something that's kind of important that didn't exist before. But I don't know. It's also kind of big for my community. We're a community of 10,000 people. So, it was funny because I went in to get my sport coat, my brown sport coat. So the sleeves were too long. I buy all my sport coats off eBay. And so a great sport coat. And the local the seamstress, I took it in and I said, yeah, sleeves are too long. And she looks at me and she said, yeah, I know you. Like, I saw you on TV. You're the guy on TV. I'm like, yeah, it shows quite a bit here in Wisconsin. I'm like, yeah. But she goes, oh yeah, and she's like, oh, really nice sport coat. I'm like, yeah, I pay like $20 for it. But I don't know. I think it's cool. I mean, I don't, as I would say, I don't have the, I don't use the PhD and I don't use the credentials as a hammer. I know people that do that. I think it gets kind of distasteful. But I don't do that. But it's professionally and personally been very fulfilling to do the work that I've done. And I think a lot of this catapulted, and I did the show on it a few weeks ago, right? Or maybe more than a few weeks ago. But when I worked for 4 years as the director of therapy services at the School for the Blind, I don't know, 2014 to 19 or 15 to 19, that was the same time I wrote School of Errors. So I'd already been on PBS before that, but then, but I think that really changed the way that I perceived things. The accessibility of writing, right? And that's why Velocity of Information has an audiobook with it, even though the publisher wasn't as hip on that at the start. And I was like, oh, wait, we're not signing a contract here unless there's an audiobook part of this. And so, yeah, it's been really cool. And for me, like, it's fun. And it's fun to wake up in the morning and go through emails and have somebody email and say, hey, like, I bought your book and I like this. Or it's a good friend, Old Humble, Excelsior. And I've been following your streams and the stuff you've been building, your tables and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. So it's amazing. I'm honestly, like, I'm in awe at the stuff that you've been building for your distillery. So it's really cool. And so it's cool to get these emails of people who have seen the TV stuff or read the books. And I think the Velocity of Information will be the same thing. And, the excitement in my hometown library here, we have a very nice library. It's modern and, it's a community of 10,000, but I mean, so this author event, it's a big thing to have in the community and have the media come in and cover it. and to meet with people and stuff. And then bigger stuff will be down in Madison. Um, but it is, yeah, it's very meaningful to do that. Um, so Yo Bacon, you go and advertise Cappy for free, got to charge him those shekels. So our good friend Aaron Clary, yeah, Captain Capitalism.blogspot.com, the Clary podcast. So yeah, so I've known Aaron for a long time. So, and when he gets back to Wisconsin, give me a call. And if it works, we are able to do lunch or supper or whatever. So it's good. Cappy is a personal friend of mine, was highly instrumental in getting me into 2000, just like Doc. So yeah. And Bacon, you've been really dedicated to your channel and working hard to get all of your followers and stuff. So I think you would have got there, but yeah, I remember when Cap did that video for you, as he did for me. So I appreciate that, because when there's kind of like a big influencer does stuff like that, it's like, just wow. Well, thank you, appreciate it. Hey, yeah, the goddamn Bacon things are as well as I can expect. And old Humboldt Distilling Company there in the great state of Texas. I'm very proud of those two tables. They're great. As I was watching those, I'm like, I could probably make those, but I'm not sure. But I would feel like a big sense of accomplishment if I made those. Like I was like, that is really cool. Like yeah, and I even saw how you had on the wheels. You've got it set up somehow. I could see from one of the pictures, right, where you could probably like press down and freeze the table where it's at, then so the wheels wouldn't move or whatever. It's just really cool. I was like, yes, this is awesome, man. But I maybe I'm just kidding myself that I could make those, but I'm glad that you did. It's really cool. Just joking me. So yeah, here's Old Humble. Check out Old Humble, and he does a number of kind of impromptu shows also, but otherwise less Thursday night shows. So I don't know about that, man. Zero carpentry skills. If I can do it, you can do it. Hell, again. But I kind of like, I build doors in my house, and from kind of just figuring it out, which are damn good doors. And actually, my brother one time came down. He's like, "Where did you get these?" I'm like, "I made those." And to this day, like, they're perfect. Like I'm like, yeah, it's pretty incredible. Yeah, and I made a specialized door in one of the side rooms that is just perfect. And yeah, yeah, I'm like, I don't know, like, what the hell was I thinking? Like, how I had to learn how to do box. It wasn't that back. I think one of the things is, like, when you do things, sometimes you can just do them because people haven't told you can't do them. And I remodeled the front of my house. We had redwood siding when we moved in, and some of it had rotted out. So I replaced some of that and molding, and it was a pretty extensive project, like in one summer. And it's pretty good. I mean, now this house has like industrial steel siding, like hurricane grade stuff like that. But yeah, I kind of got away from that. Although I did some things around the house, in the last year. But I mean, I was really like intense carpentry when we first moved in here. Like, no one. It's funny because, like, this is the house when we were looking for places 20 years ago. We drove by it, and I'm like, yeah, that's off the list. Like, there was not even a second look at it. And then eventually, like, we were looking at other places and stuff, and it's the neighborhood's very desirable because it's close to the schools and the new hospital, stuff like that. And it's on top of a hill, so like drainage and stuff is really good. Like, you don't get water in your basement when it rains, stuff like that. So we came back, and there was this old TV antenna on the roof, and the shingles were old, and then the metal, the rust was all down the roof, and the backboard is busted on the garage. And so we went through here, and it's like, the house was built in 79, but it was built really well. So, like, redwood rafters, and just a strong, solid house, but it hadn't been maintained very well. And so yeah, the first 3-4 years was just spent working. And like, my dad came down, and we ripped out completely cleaned out what I call the fireplace room. Everything's utilitarian or utility for me. And so it was a fireplace room, and we ripped out all the paneling and every stuff, and I, had somebody rewire it, and we worked and rebuilt that entire room. And then I had professional carpenters, like, come in and do some of the stuff, but I did a fair amount of the stuff myself. And then in the garage, took out and redid the concrete mostly myself. Like, and someone who does concrete and is doing like a patch of concrete on the side of my house next year, like, actually said, like, this is well done. Like, this looks really good, and this is held up like really well. And I'm like, I did that because it was all kind of crumbled. And but now, like, if you go past the house, you wouldn't be able to tell its age. Like, you'd be like, oh, that's like 10 years old, or whatever, 5 years old. Like, it's really, like, it's completely modernized and had the chimney rebuilt and stuff like that. And inside too, it's very modern. I mean, the kitchen is the area we should probably rip everything apart, but both the bathrooms have been redone, and it's a really nice house. Especially now that the market around us is just crazy, like, but the house market, but yeah. So anyway, it's, I don't know where we're kind of going on that, but just kind of try things, right? I mean, kind of what's the worst that can happen, and you can learn from things. But Bolo said, I used to be a finisher, tired of fixing other people's mistakes. Yep. So what we did is, we had all new windows put in. So I hired a carpenter, a guy who was young. He's probably like in his late 20s. And he had like the energy, right? Like, he knew what he was doing, and he had the energy, and I had a couple guys that worked with him. And like, I think I got him at the right time in life, because like, he was just so devoted to like doing a good job on the kind of the overall project of like the siding and the windows and some of the other stuff. So, but yeah, it was I mean, it was amazing. We don't have a lot of pictures from when we moved in, which I regret, to just show the transformation. But yeah, we've had people who stop by and they'd be like, oh, I used to live in this neighborhood or whatever, and the house looks nothing like it did. So, to use a fire extinguisher, go try again, never give up. So, did you use I have fire extinguishers. Being a former firefighter, I have them all over the house. So I have one literally probably 7 feet from me right now. So yes, I'm pretty good with that. So, Old Humble is posting, that's 80% of entrepreneurship, taking the risks. Nobody's going to save you, so figure it out. Yeah. And you're right. So buying a home, that was a big thing. I did body work on our previous car, our 14-year-old car, that we got rid of in December, but I did the body work on that myself. Like, my wife, somebody like sideswiped her, and maybe, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. So I just like did it myself, bondoed it, pounded out the stuff, and, best I could, smoothed it down, painted it. It was pretty good, black car. And it never, kind of failed after that. I mean, it held up pretty well. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing, is just do it. It's like with book writing, right? Like, you just got to get in and do it, and see how it turns out. John Steele's asking, thoughts on interest rates, economy, Bitcoin, real estate. Well, yeah. So interest rates, I don't see anything more than 2%, even though I think interest rates should be higher. I think remember, like, Doc's the guy who remembers interest rates at 10%. I remember certificates of deposit of 10%, and had those, right? I just don't think the Fed's going to do it. I don't think Paul's going to do it. If you watch his language, like, we're considering a hike in March, and well, yeah, if you do 0.25 basis points, it won't matter. Not when inflation's 10% and more. So maybe 2%. I don't think the Fed is willing to do it, the Federal Reserve, and especially coming into midterms, like, and it's very clear the stock market has learned that if the Fed hints at interest rates, the market will tank and punish the Fed. So I just don't see it, at least in the short term. Economy wise, I think personally, I think things have kind of bottomed for a while. I mean, we've taken a 10% dip on the S&P plus since the end of December. So I think there's a base now. Usually, the stock market does pretty well in summer. I mean, traditionally, it just always does pretty well in summer. So I think we're kind of getting into that stretch. I don't probably see like this big recovery, but I would be surprised going forward if the same craziness of January happened in February. I just don't think that will be like 1,000 points down and then end up 100 points. I think we're probably past that for now. Economy, yeah. I mean, until we kind of get things move, I think real estate's going to cool down. I mean, who's going to be able to purchase these places, right? I mean, that's we get visited by realtors in person where I live because we're outside of Madison, and this is a hot market, and so they'll say, hey, like we're representing a house down the road, and this is what we're listing it at, and we're getting competitive bids, and here's where we think it's going to sell. Would you be interested in selling? And I'm saying, nah. And they said, well, could we talk? Like, can we tell you what we think your house would be, how we would, if we'd buy it from you directly, or like, well, we would start the bidding, or where we might go. So I'm like, you can tell me that. I mean, it's information I have. It doesn't change my mind, but it's crazy, right? How are these people going to get money to buy homes? Like our home is like triple in value since we've moved here. Of course, it impacts on taxes and stuff, but I mean, if you're starting out or if you're elderly, right, and you're in a fixed income situation, you can't get a bank CD. A 5-year bank CD in my area is 1.2%. That's the best, which is ridiculous, right? It's just a hedge that you don't go to negative interest rate. You're not keeping up with inflation by any means. But these people are screwed. I mean, because their rent goes up, their association dues, their healthcare insurance, the cost of milk, heating, all that stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, with the cryptos, I think we're getting more and more saber rattling of the presidential administration saying we're going to do some regulation. What does that mean, right? So I think that is completely nebulous and wide open, right? So I don't know. I don't have I don't know as much nearly about that. I'm pretty fluid in the other areas, equities and things like that. I think there's so much of a variable with what an administration could do, right? Of the Federal Reserve or Hank Paul or the IRS or whatever saying whatever. And what does that mean? I mean, I think there's going to be this standoff between Bitcoin and the Federal Reserve at some point. Or will Bitcoin be the reason the Federal Reserve forces everybody to the digital dollar? But man, I don't know. But yeah, around me, I think real estate is still hot. But from a face validity standpoint, I'm just like, who can afford this stuff? Like I don't know. Like I said, we've been here 20 years. The house is appreciated, so it's been an appreciating asset for us. But if we were just entering the market now, I mean, like I told the dude who was here last week, I said, if I was to sell, what am I going to do? Again, I have to buy something that costs the same or more. If I were to buy a lot, and I'd end up putting more money in. I said, so, there you go. Subscribe to Big. Hey, Clyde. Yeah. Well, I'm not doing a good job of helping out the people who help me out. Bacon, Maldito. Yeah, please subscribe to his show, The Goddamn Bacon. And I'm sorry, Bacon, I don't have where I can kind of post it in what I'm doing here in StreamYard. I've got kind of this funky thing going on with StreamYard. Sorry about it. But yeah, The Goddamn Bacon. Check Friday nights is his regular show. It's 10 Central Time, but he has other shows that he puts on. He's getting more guests on his shows too. So yeah, Bacon soared over 1,000 subscribers. It's going to keep going. Media hits expecting a trucker strike shortage this summer. I don't know. The thing is, like, it's hard to organize truckers, right? And like teachers is one thing. You got the American Federation of Teachers. Truckers are hard to organize on a mass scale. So it's happening in Canada is impressive, but it's hard to see that would happen. I think the strike shortage would have already happened. Media hits, to be honest. And right, so many of these people are independent contractors and things. So again, to try to organize as a group is very difficult. So I don't think there's a strike shortage coming. And Bacon's saying, I'm still waiting to see how these people getting evicted finally will affect things now that renters. Yeah, that's a good point. Because in my state, they just kind of started that. But then again, in winter, there's certain rules on evictions. But and if you own these places, like, what's the impact on you? But that really hasn't been digested yet. I don't think it's the stimulus check stuff. I don't think that's completely off the table. I think the Democrats in Manchin, or Joe Manchin, right? I think something will still be worked out on that. Not like this universal basic income, but like where the child, if you had a kid under 17 or like whatever, you got so much money. I think there'll be something like that will be put back into place. It's kind of weird though, like the government initiatives kind of like just flattened out. So evicted renters should pay more. So yeah, kind of having that on there is almost like a social credit score. Like if you are evicted. Clyde, I would tell my buddies about Doc and other YouTubers, but California is known to cause zombie brains. So I have relatives that live in California. I have a relative who works at Google. I have relatives. When I consulted, did all my not all my consult, but I did a large amount of consulting last year for the state of California, about 27 hours a week for the education stuff. So if you look me up, I'm licensed in the state of California as an educator and stuff like that. So I hold dual license, Wisconsin, California. But so yeah. It's interesting. California is so different. Actually, once you get out of the big cities too, it's a lot of variation in the state. The feds aren't worried about Bitcoin, so yeah. I think you're right. Bacon is saying, if they can find a place at all, there's even people in my family getting foreclosed on who can't find a place. Yeah, that's so the housing stuff is crazy. And again, how much of the housing is because big pension funds now have gotten into buying up residential areas and then just renting them out and stuff. So like the neighborhoods are really no longer neighborhoods. It's just people kind of coming in and renting for a year or two from a company and then moving on. So, and the company's not going to, like you move in and kind of do what I did, you're ripping off your siding and fixing things yourself. You're not going to have that. So it is this, some of this is artificially created. So Bacon saying, appreciate it, Doc. Hey, the Fed pushed up Bitcoin's numbers. They bought a loader. I mean, right. Who knows how the Fed is mingling into that? And is there this thought of is the Fed, is Bitcoin being monitored by the Fed is kind of like the skeletal, structure for what a digital dollar might be, right? So yeah, who knows, right? It's to where these things are going to go. Media hits. The sugar industry is currently experiencing driver shortages. It's said, but overtime is still there and third parties are still getting contract. Exactly right, media hits. The fact is, because, over the road driving is largely 1099, it's not unionized, they'll just pay more money and people take these positions. So like that's where, like what's happening in Canada is pretty amazing. In the US, it would be much harder to do that if you could do that at all. But we're also at this point, and I wrote about it in the Velocity of Information, which is very well worth acknowledging. And if we look from 1980 to 2030, so we have to look out a little bit. But 1980, we were warehousing. So we'd build a lot of product and we put it in a warehouse and ship it out from warehouse. It also meant that when we were done, we had product we had to mark down and get out and stuff like that. So it took a kind of a while to change from one thing to another. We went then to just-in-time manufacturing largely in the 90s. I mean, it started to come into play in the late 70s, 80s. Japan had a Toyota, but by the 90s, and especially early 2000s, just-in-time manufacturing was happening, especially like the book industry, right? So like my book, if you order from the publisher, they will press a button and it will print it up at the publisher and it'll get sent out to you. They're not going to go to the warehouse and pull it off a pallet. So just-in-time manufacturing meant you didn't have as much stuff in a warehouse. You'd manufacture it, go on a truck, go to the distributor or right to your house. But what's happening right now is there's something else happening, and that's the move to 3D printing and personal home 3D printing or regional or very close to you, right? So that then means it's much faster that you can get these things. And so this whole thing with industry right now and like autonomous vehicles and autonomous semis and drones, stuff like that. How much money are you going to put into improving just-in-time manufacturing when additive manufacturing or filament 3D is right around the corner? Like GE did a white paper, which I wrote about in the Velocity of Information, where, they're saying your auto parts store, your Napa, your AutoZone, in 5 years, you're going to go in and say, need a fuel pump and whatever, and they'll take the VIN number or whatever it is, and they'll say, okay, here it is, and they'll press a button, and the 3D printer will print it up, and you'll have it. Like they won't have the back stock, and so there'll be efficiencies, or you'll have things at home that you'll be able to print. Check out Flying Rich on YouTube. So these aren't just novelty items anymore. It's not a flute or something like that. He had his pool cleaner that failed, and he needed bearings on it, so he went and he 3D printed these. Like he did a little CAD stuff and then cloud computing and shared out and working together with different people to do this and download. So I think it's pretty amazing. But part of what's happening right now, I'm fully convinced on this. Part of what's happening right now is we're not seeing improvements in the supply chain like we'd want to see them, because the big manufacturers are like, why should I put money into this when we're probably closer to 3D printing than we are to just in time? And we're moving to 3D. So why do I want to improve this system that we're exiting? And here's an example. So I talked to Robert, when I interviewed Robert Travis, the crapboat guy, and I said, hey, like, where do you see because he'd say it's dangerous as hell, right? Like, Bureau of Labor Statistics is job dangerous, most dangerous in the world. And we had a really long discussion. And he said, well, the boats could be made safer. Like you could technically outfit these boats with sensors and, that would identify when waves were coming and do the alarms faster and, put up better railing systems and better things to knock down ice. Like you could technically design these ships to be safer. It would cost you a lot of money. And you'd have to like put in a lot of new technology and whatever, but you could probably do it. But the thing is, like, by the time you got all of that in place, let's say it would take you 5-6 years. The boats that are going to be made in 10 years might not have deckhands. It'll all be robotic. It'll all be controlled from the wheelhouse. So really, the only time a deckhand might come out there is like to fix a robot. And so he's like, what's the incentive? Like to try to improve the deckhand safety when it's pretty clear that the deckhand's going to be automated in the next decade. Like they won't be out there. And it's in a lot of places, right? So I think it's also this thing with truck drivers and these other things of like, why are we going to, and as 3D printing is this huge part of this, of, not only your local Walmart and your AutoZone, but your McDonald's, your Kentucky Fried Chicken. As crazy as it sounds, and again, I've read the white papers. I cited them in my book. It's happening in other countries. Like they have filament printers which will print you up a meal. And I think there was some guy on Jimmy Kimmel who's a chef, and he only works in a restaurant where they 3D print. And he said, granted, like it's not where it will be in 5 or 10 years, but he said it will be to a very high level. And well, I mean, so imagine, like, I go back to the scene in Back to the Future. Oh boy, you can hydrate a pizza. You know, they have that that Black and Decker thing where it's a little pizza square and then it hydrates it in like 10 seconds, but full size pizza. And it sounds really weird and really bizarre to think of things that way. And I'm not saying like I'm for or against. I'm just saying like the trend line is fully there. And like General Electric in this white paper, which I cited, they're already doing this in a lot of places, and they fully expect that these restaurants, and not only restaurants, but or fast food, but other restaurants will have things that will completely be 3D printed. Now, there are some things to this. I mean, what if you have certain allergy or diabetes or things like this or whatever? Like, you could have hypothetically healthier food printed for you, but it's not necessarily authentic food. But it's interesting because I think part of what's happening right now, again, is we are being brought on, this is being exacerbated because we're changing from just in time to 3D print. And I think people are underestimating how big 3D printing really is in a corporate level. I read some papers by 3M in the last day or two, and how 3M is making a big shift into supporting filament printing for industry and for personal, use type items. So so there's this piece, no one's talking about it, right? So like lots of information, stuff like this. I think we're caught up right now in this whole thing. Who would have thought like telemedicine with University of Pittsburgh Med, it's up tenfold since the start of the pandemic. It probably wouldn't have got that way for another 5 to 10 years. For nonviolent crimes, doing court hearings by Zoom is up substantially. Probably wouldn't have been there. I wrote about that in the book. Probably wouldn't have been there for another 5-10 years. So that is Flying Rich's website. So yeah, he's a 3D enthusiast, also a cloud computing expert, plus a cloud computing expert. He's he's a pilot, has his pilot license also. But so Rich is the kind of guy, like if something breaks down for him, he'd be like, I'll just print the part. And it's amazing because he'll like design it out, or he'll like get it to other people, or they'll design it and he'll do some like, if this doesn't work, he'll like redesign it. And how the eviction is being done. So what are these things is, yeah, I don't know what's the new, so something is happening with evictions. They're calling them, I don't know, 15-minute evictions or what is it? Where they're really fast. They come in and boom, you're gone. Bacon. I don't think we'll ever see a rental situation like this before. Yeah, rental and homes, and in cars, right? Like, we sold a 14-year-old car for much more than we would have been able to sell it for 2 years ago, right? And like we were fortunate, we ordered the vehicle that we have, back in March, and then the new orders are substantially higher. So like the dealer said, just drive it back on the lot. We'll give you the money that you paid for it. But yeah, this is so weird. And I'm very thankful we have a house that we've had for 20 years in a growing area, because it's been a hedge against inflation for us. But if you're starting out, again, these days are student loan and you're trying to buy a house and you're like, oh, the entry for a house market is like 400,000 or 500,000. Holy smokes. I don't know, man. I really don't know. Yeah. Deckhands will be automated, but it won't be an overnight industry conversion. People still use fax machines and landlines. It takes a while for these things to work their way through. You're right. And a lot of the stuff with the crab boat is like the crab boats are usually like boats that were something else before crab boats. So like, Coast Guard boats and stuff like that. But I would say like over the timeline, eventually the job of a deckhand will be gone. As we know it today, there'll still be some people doing some things, but like, and it'll just be more effective or more cost efficient, or they'll just be efficiencies that'll be built in. But yeah, so try to put yourself in the mind of like, you're running one of these companies for crab boats, and it's like, do we invest the money to try to make these boats safer for our deckhands, or do we just realize that we're going to automate these boats in the next 10 or even 15 years, and deckhands won't be a big part of it anymore, or their role will change, or these things will just kind of naturally get safer as these automations just come into play. So I think we're at this point where people are kind of like doing the standoff, right? Like, I'm not going to put this. I think we see it in the car industry too. I mean, it was really a strange thing with like Pete Buttigieg the other day coming out with this whole proclamation against cars, and too many car deaths and stuff like that. 40,000 a year average car deaths. Because, and so what is really, we're kind of on this path though, right? Because cars are having forward braking, lane departure. These things are just kind of there. Airbags. We're having automation in vehicles. Like we're on this trajectory where vehicles should be safer, and transportation itself should be safer. Vehicles being able to identify other vehicles, to be able to mitigate if something is happening to the vehicle itself. And so it kind of was like, something is just going to get better, not naturally, but we're on that path where that's going to get improved. So yeah, I think I was reading something like train derailments, for example. And if you take like the number of miles trains drive versus like train accidents or derailments, like it's so small versus like what it used to be, right? So yeah. Bolo to bacon. Change is needed. Don't have the solutions. Got heart, but that ain't squat. So yeah. Well, there's this, I didn't write it. I don't think I wrote about it in the book. I thought about it in the book, but there's this whole concept of singularity, right? Singularity in a nutshell means that technology and kind of like human thinking are going to cross at some point. And I think there are numbers out there. It would be between the years 2042 and 2052, where, I don't know if you've seen the movie iRobot, right? Where society might start to have, some robotics and some AI, which is, I'm not saying it's doing human thought, but there are some things that are functioning or in companion roles. And that once we hit the singularity, it's going to change a lot of things, like, what is work going to look like? Or, what does sports or like a NASCAR look like if it's a AI type of thing? Or, what if instead of like the Super Bowl, it's the Super Bowl, but it's two robot teams? I mean, I don't know, but I think the fear with singularity is like, what happens to human creativity and value and sense of purpose and agency? I listened to these two priests. So, by the way, I'm going to hang in here just a second here. We're going to take a 120-second break. So starting now.
As chaos erupts, torrents of conflicting yet urgent messages gush from media outlets. What is the magnitude of the incident, and what should people do to protect themselves? Dr. David Perrodin clarifies human behavior during days, weeks, months, or even years of chaos. Reporter James David Dixon of the Detroit News proclaims, "The velocity of information is an education in the way people react and adapt to change. Never has it been more important to sift facts and stories for truth and meaning. The Velocity of Information will teach you how people have done it in history, in the modern day, and even in prison. There are teachable moments on every page. Buy The Velocity of Information, Human Thinking During Chaotic Times. Available from your favorite bookstore or online retailer. A must-read for parents, teachers, and taxpayers. Dr. David Perrodin has written the most honest book about the $3 billion school safety industrial complex. Attorney James Sibley proclaims, a brave demonstration of speaking truth to power. School of Errors rips the lid off the billion-dollar school safety industry. Using real-world examples of successful responses in desperate situations, David contrasts the expensive window dressings pitched to panicked parents with the inexpensive and effective approaches proven to actually work. Read this book before you let your school waste another precious dollar on meaningless safety theater. Buy the international bestseller School of Errors, Rethinking School Safety in America, now at Barnes & Noble or Amazon.
And we're back. Yes, those are the two commercials, and there's a third commercial, an alternate to the Velocity of Information, which is being created right now. So the middle of it is going to have more scenes of like chaos going on. So pretty cool. If you ever want to use one of those, please let me know and I will get those to you. You can share each one of those in your show. But yeah, so where was, Old Humble saying deckhands will be automated, but it won't be overnight. Yep. What? Solitude server? What? Clyde, if you leave people a drive, you have a single dynamic. I have a relative who also works in the car industry, and he said the plan is, in the next 10 to 15 years to have where all of the vehicles recognize the other vehicles on the road and things like that. And so I don't know. It's not, like the vehicle we have is pretty wild. At least compared to what we used to have. To tell you everything that's around it and the 360 cameras and all the adaptive cruise and how far things are in front of you. And we have like lifetime navigation. So it's a big screen, so it's always, I don't know. So if robots drive, you have another dynamic. I don't know. But I think it's, there's another argument, right? So elderly people, who maybe have lost some, vision or response time, or people with disabilities. So now you have more accessibility. So like what I remember from the movie I Robot is like Will Smith could drive the vehicle if he wanted, right? But if he wanted to not drive it, he just told the vehicle to take over, and then the vehicle drove. And that's how I'm hoping like things will go to. But at the CDEC, you do a show on the film Major League, just a bit outside, trying the corner and missed. Can you on the film Major League? Oh my God, that's hilarious. So that was filmed, at Milwaukee County Stadium here in Wisconsin, just a bit outside. Willie Mays Hayes. Today's show is brought to you by, the hell with it, I can't find it. God, I love that movie. 1989. Yeah, Ricky Vaughn. So The Wild Thing. It's hard to believe it was that long ago, but filmed it at Milwaukee County Stadium as Cleveland Municipal Stadium. So, God, that was a great movie. Who did they? Willie Mays Hayes, and then the dude that had the snake and did the voodoo ritual on his locker and stuff like that. But that's crazy. I don't want a robot motorcycle. That'd be wild. I didn't even think about a robot motorcycle. My vehicle is more than 10 years old. It will be extremely slow conversion to automated cars without serious regulation to literally ban. The thing is, you're right. But remember, I wrote about this or read about this in the last couple of days. I went back to the old cash for clunkers. So 690,000 vehicles taken off in a very short amount of time, taken off the roads in the cash for clunkers. Was it 2009 that happened or 2008? So, I agree. It's going to be this slow transition. I think as we look at this, like looking at John Deere tractors is a good way to analyze this. They went and automated tractors, and now like if you work on your tractor by yourself, like it won't start. It has to be done by a dealer. You take it to a dealer, they come out to you. But yet, if you have a tractor from 1950, you can still get parts for it, or manufacture parts, or 3D print parts to keep this thing going. So, but it'll just be this point of saturation of how much of the new stuff is going to, be made that's going to force to be integrated into the grid, right? But yeah, I think there will be this move to ban some cars. You just won't be able to license it anymore. That happened in a few other countries. They just said we won't let you tag these anymore. So I don't know. I'm not comfortable with the pace that we are moving toward electric vehicles. That was one of the reasons we bought the SUV right now, because I didn't want to. I didn't want to get an electric SUV in Wisconsin, where it's last week was 20 below, and I have a friend who has an electric vehicle that was out of warranty. He ended up paying $5,000 or $8,000 to fix the battery or something. I forget what it was, like here in Wisconsin, and I don't know, man. Yeah. I do not know, but I think we forget about the cash for clunkers. How many functioning vehicles were 690? Not that all of these were great vehicles, right? But there were a number of these vehicles that they just didn't, they got under 20 miles to the gallon or whatever, and people were taking them in, and they would still be probably running today. Like, that to me was a horrible, in retrospect, thing to do. And that we took vehicles off the road that necessarily shouldn't have been taken off the road, still had a lot of life left in them. I forget what the whole credit, that it was basically to save GM, right? And Ford was like $4 a share stock at that time too. But GM was going through bankruptcy, so this was to create a demand for General Motors. So cash for clunkers was federal money to buy old cars. That's the definition of serious Fed intervention. Yeah. But to fully automate classic cars, can't be allowed to drive without a convert. Yeah. I think it would be kind of like, what is it? How they do, like if you were to drive a Model T, you could only drive it like on a road. What is it legally? Like that's 25 miles an hour. You could take a Model A Ford, but you would have to have a conversion to have a high gear put in. I think there'd be some of these things. The other part is I think it would just be like, it'd be like old CRT TVs, right? Or old freezers or something like that. Like people, if you move to these newer models, the older models will just become less prevalent, right? And fewer places will maintain them and things, and they just will become, and maybe they'll be around to some extent, or maybe your insurance companies will say, yeah, it's a classic, you can drive it X number of miles, we'll insure you, or like to certain things, but otherwise, whatever. You can still drive unlicensed cars unless the law is that you're impounded when you get pulled over. So, wow, I didn't know that. Batteries don't take well in cold temps. They swell up and freeze. Yep. And that's that's what people in Canada, my friends in Canada, are telling me with electric vehicles. I have a friend who recently got an electric vehicle. I don't know, electric or electric hybrid, and said, forget it. The winter just killed it. Has to completely plug it in and jump it all the time in winter right now. So there are 3 goals: create demand, raise fuel efficiency of the fleet, and simulate a recessed economy. So Yeah. And the thing, so right, but we're at this weird point because, for example, and I know I'm an anomaly in this, but when I drove my car today, I put on 2,000 miles in the last 6 months. I just don't drive a lot anymore. And part of it, I mean, a big part of it is like, well, this semester I'm teaching, all my spring semesters I teach online, fall semesters I teach in person. And if you have remote work and things, I mean, if people aren't having to drive as much, the demand is just going to naturally fall, too, on some of these things. So I don't know. I just, um, like I said, I have a relative that works at Google and said, one of their things is they want like 70% of their jobs to be remote, to be work independent. Like you can live wherever you want. So, but I mean, I can, if I were to bring back the consulting business that I did last year, which was largely driven from the pandemic, and I was in retirement, but I kind of came out to do that because it was just great money and I enjoyed what I was doing. And, plus my skill set, my expertise was a good match, but I could start that up again and I would never have to leave this basement office. I could do everything from down here. And yeah, so it's crazy. Like um, and I would work with clients around the country. So like I said, most of my clients were in California last year. And I wasn't in California once last year. So, but yeah, it is pretty amazing how things have changed. But so this is Bacon to Old Humble. Depends. I certainly ain't sticking up for the commuters here, but while AI is superior in repetitive tasks, some patterns, humans are better at abstract adaptive. So, and I think we're far away from AI, like really getting good at, I guess, at driving and things like that, or flying airplanes or whatever. But when I talked, so Linda Stone, I interviewed. Linda Stone was the vice president of Microsoft. And I talked to her about the autonomous vehicle thing. And she said, call this guy who was like a researcher in autonomous, I forget who he was. And I didn't actually quote him in the book, but one of the things one of the experts in the field of autonomous vehicles said, yeah, not quite there yet. Like there's a lot to be learned, I guess, in how the AI processes things, how the environment is structured to accommodate the AI. And there's just a lot down there. But it's kind of weird because we'll see on the news like, oh, here's an autonomous Tesla that crashed or something like that. But yeah, it is, and we think it's going to be safer. But again, is it necessarily safer? That was one of her questions to me. Everybody assumes like it'll be, and I have a research study in the velocity of information saying, if 75% of vehicles, University of Texas, I think, said they think it would save almost $1 trillion to the economy per year. But, again, do you really know that? If you had, some type of situation happen that damaged the electrical grid or something like that, I mean, I don't know. It's going to be weird to cross over. And what does insurance look like, right? I mean, no one's really talked about that. Like, what happens if your autonomous vehicle gets in an accident? I assume liability is the same or not, or how does that look in court? Got to get the AI up on the stand, like the emu limu. So, motorcycle helmet laws make you laugh. You die with your helmet on. Yeah. All Pro Lemonton talking about helmet. He's got a biking helmet on in that image right there, falling in. Welcome, buddy. Old Humble. Oh, absolutely. The last mile problem is the hardest one to overcome. A robot can easily travel between cities, but the last mile parking lot is extremely complex. Yeah, absolutely. Makes me want to bring up one of those Boston Dynamic videos where they have the spoof stuff with the robot. The thing is, though, like eventually it'll get there, and so that's the thing in like big industry. And as I go through and I read, I guess, the white papers of GE, of 3M and stuff, and that's people are getting to that last mile mentality. So they're like, how much are we going to invest in the current system versus the last mile system? And And I think it's a big dilemma for agency and purpose. Like, I forget what this podcast, I should know it, but I watch. It's two priests. They're two young guys. They're like in their 30s, and they talk about kind of like these things like agency and purpose, and how do you like get young people to feel that church is of value to them, or how do they find their agency and purpose as they look and say, by the time I'm 50, a lot of the world is going to be either automated, or some AI, or if you're 20 now, by the time you're 50, it's not going to be uncommon to interface with robots during your day, right? I mean, that's just at grocery stores, or at going municipal things. It will be like iRobot. So I think that's where these guys were kind of coming at it, of saying it's really an existential crisis for young people right now, because they are projecting out, and they know the world will substantially change, and their role in it will substantially change. Like, what does work do? Or like the movie Wall-E, right? Or whatever. Or like, how do you find agency and purpose? Which is really these kind of deep questions. So the velocity of information kind of goes there, because I have this section where there's this futurist her name is Faith Popcorn, right? I'm sure it's not a real name, and years ago, she was predicting that humans would eventually cocoon themselves. That's her term, cocooning. And they pull into this virtual reality life. And she was saying this, like, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. And she's reiterating it right now. And in the book at the end, I countered that and said, the thing is, like, yeah, like, I think that will be there. Imagine you're going out for a hike, but for some reason you physically are unable to take the hike, or you can't get to the location to hike or whatever. So you're going to like put on these tactile sensory things and goggles, and you're going to go on this hike with people, even though you're not there, you're just at your house. So yeah, that'll happen. Or go to a concert, or maybe like this. I mean, maybe 10 years from now, like the Super Bowl, instead of going to the Super Bowl, yeah, you can be there, but also you can have your 3D, goggles and your haptic devices, and you can buy a subscription, and you can be if you were in a certain seat, right? And they would sell it to you, and then you'd experience it as if it was happening. So it's these things, like, so this whole velocity is. So I wrote, and I said, I think that will be parallel. Like, people will always have the opportunity to go out and go to the event or the hike, or be out in nature, do the things or whatever. Or like, there'll be this option to go to a concert, but do it virtually, where you're immersed in it through this whole 3D system, or even like Elon Musk Neuralink. But her thing is like, no, there will be a point when people will prefer that. But the thing is, like, so then the robots make everything, and the 3D printers print our food, and like, what do we do? So the book kind of gets there at the end, the velocity of information, because, right? Don't forget, all of us woke up in March of 2020, and we were either essential or non-essential by our government. All of us, every single one of us. Who would have thought that would have happened? No one is talking about it today. I mean, I wrote an entire section about it in the book. So what, we are getting to this point, and I honestly Faith makes good arguments. I mean, I'm kind of like, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe there are going to be some people who are just going to check out and go to the metaverse. I don't think so, but I put her argument in the book, where she's saying, the reason people are kind of like cocooning and kind of starting to move out of society is they want to move into this virtual society where there isn't going to be, they can be whoever they want, right? They can take on whatever avatar, whatever persona they can be. They never have to age. Their hearing is always like, perfect. Their, everything is functioning. If they had hemiparesis, now suddenly, their avatar is so it's just all of these. They can be rich, they can be poor, they can be, it's all of these things that can be created. But it's pretty fascinating. This Faith popcorn. So like that's something you're going to get out of the velocity of information is coming down of saying there is this decision either society or people will be making soon of like, are you, and like Mark Zuckerberg wants you to commit to the metaverse. And what does that really mean for reality? Are you going to what is your reality? You're stepping in and out of both. And I don't know, it's really bizarre stuff. Heavy water. Welcome, heavy water. The water is very heavy, by the way. I'm just saying it is. I get your point, though. And it's America, and grown-ups should choose their headwear. So if every car on the road is automated, you wouldn't need traffic signals. Cars that's the plan. So yeah, those are the white papers out of like GM and the Department of Transportation. Yep. And the vehicles, yeah, would right. All of that would be changed. That's all in the white papers. So white papers are basically like futuristic research papers or like pilots that have been done. They're different than full research studies. They're more pilots, but that's why they're called the white papers. But I tend to read a lot of those. Bacon to Old Humble agreed. I could see long distance where AI can take over. I speak mainly as a city interurban driver, though things can change in an instant. Yeah. So, and the thing is, like, at some point, like, will the AI be able to handle virtually any environment, or the thought would be handle it as good or better than a human could? I don't know. Old Humble, how can drivers be liable for AI accident when they're not driving? Yeah, I don't know. So how does it work right now, right? Because Tesla, when somebody has a Tesla that is set on automate, happened here in Wisconsin. And I think the person was actually asleep and the vehicle was driving itself down the interstate and it hit someone. So I don't know. Right. What does liability look like? Or will we get to this point where insurance companies and the government will kind of work together? Insurance companies will say, if your vehicle doesn't have XYZ, you'll have this additional higher premium. Or if it's not part of the plugged in grid, right? Either they'll have to retrofit more modern vehicles or just say, like, you have X number of years to get to this vehicle. And then say you'll have lower rates, or, I don't know. I don't know how this will all kind of be schemed together. It's kind of like the Ring phone, or the Ring thing on the phone, or not on your doorbell. There's a community near us where the police said, we want to have all these integrated for better surveillance to keep the community safer. And people were like, okay. So suddenly there's this whole mosaic of the community through these personal, video doorbells. And it's kind of, so police are monitoring this, and it's this data, which is there forever, that they can use in court, but it's kind of like weird. I don't know how, I feel about that. So below saying, I like my in real life avatar. What's wrong? So, yeah. So the some of the white papers on the metaverse, is everyone will get to pick their avatar, right? Or they can multiple avatars or change their avatars, but then people will have a better that people want to live vicariously through their metaverse existence. That's part of the push on this. So it's strange, but yeah, now as we think about like the Super Bowl and stuff like that coming up and things like it will be, I would say, in the next 10 years, you'll be able to buy in different seats, and, you'll be wearing the haptic things, and you'll be right in your house, and you'll be experiencing those types of things, or like exclusives, like, maybe you'll get to hang out up in a booth with some of the celebrities or former players, like just virtually, or who knows where people are going to take this stuff. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it's like, it's there. It's like trending. My general counter argument to this is as cappy as people will still crave the human touch. That's one reason why waiters are still around. Um, yeah, maybe but I say I don't know. I don't know on this. And ultimately, like if corporations and businesses are saying we're going to right now, I mean, Bacon Out by You, um, there. If you check this out, I mean, there are banks, and they are completely automated, right? I mean, completely branches where you go in and it's the ATMs, and if you want to talk to somebody, you punch in whatever, and they come up on a screen. They're in some other location, and I mean, they can't do cashier's checks and can't do like mortgage and stuff. Like then you have to go to a different one. But some of these are just being completely, and yeah, I mean, I think these are. I mean, I think what Cappy is describing is almost like nostalgia, and I think I love that too. Like I would love to be at a full service restaurant or for full service like resort or something like that. Like and yeah, I think those will become more they'll be more expensive and more rare premium experiences, but for the general population, those experiences just aren't going to work there. Like be there. Like I mean, where do we see Arby's and Taco Bell and McDonald's in 10 years? Maybe with two people working a shift, right? You'll come in with a kiosk and or you'll order ahead or stuff like that. And, a lot of the stuff will be robotically 3D printed or whatever. And the other people will just be making sure the things are kind of supplied or if there's like a glitch in something. But it's kind of like banks. Like around me, the banks now function with about two people, like literally. I was in a bank today, and the bank was built about 20 years ago. Nice building, big building. And there's a person up in front that I'm working with. Up and down the sides of the bank, empty office, empty office, empty office, empty office, empty office, empty office. They still have some furniture, no decorations, no whatever. There's no pen on the table. All of it's empty. Nobody's there. The place, when it opened, probably employed 8-10 people during a typical shift. Now 2 people, right? Because they'll say, dude, use our app. Like that's already the thing. Do you have the app? Can you use the app? Can you take a picture of this in the app? Can you do this? Can you do? And it's like, man, wow. They've been saying it since the 90s to a blue. And I say, yeah. So yeah. I guess I'm not really a futurist. I'm kind of saying like, I'll see it when I believe it too. It's the more I read, I guess the white papers, I think we're at this point where we are moving from just in time to 3D, which will have a lot of things. And then also there's probably this whole other side of like what's going to AI if we really talk about like Tesla and what's those things are probably all happening at the same time here. But right, you have to have responsible players in that and governments and things like that, and not trying to manipulate these things. So it could all fall apart too. My journal. Oh. So this is Old Humble. It also depends on location too. It's like automated flushes on toilets. Get outside of the city on Dinto, rural communities, and you have to touch a toilet like a cave. Yes. Oh my goodness. So Bolo said, I can be replaced by a robot. I'm the human touch. So what is it like is it Japan where there's this growing industry for robot companions? I think Vice did that. There's also in the US. I just don't hear a lot of media coverage on that. But I mean, there will be a point in time when there'll have to be some law written or whatever, or someone will want to marry a robot, or a robotic, I don't want to say human, right? But I mean, there will be some point in time when someone will want to do that, and I don't know what that means, and but I don't know if it happened in my lifetime, but I mean, but I think like all that's out there, like you can kind of see that like setting up right now. Um, and Bacon, this is from Old Humble to Bacon, but the cars aren't fully automated. Theoretically, eliminate human drivers would eliminate accidents. Liability wouldn't matter, but at that point, it's only the AI's fault. So yeah, then um, is it that the company can be sued, or is it that the laws change? So if it is AI and something happens, that there is a cap on what? I mean, who knows? Like these are all things that'll have to come out, but I do think we will see in our lifetimes, or I'll see it in my lifetime, where your insurance company will say, if you, or the vehicle sellers, and they'll partner with the insurance companies and government will say, if you buy whatever type of vehicle, it'll be cheaper to insure, and there'll be some kind of cap put on if there is some type of accident, because they'll try to move you into this. These are also the vehicles that can press a button and shut all of them down, right? And they're always tracked and stuff like that. So it's pretty wild. This is from this Bacon to Clyde. I was a waiter for a while. It was actually sought out by diners, over even the cute waitresses there. So yeah, I think, and I do think there will be these things, right, that will have, whether it be, waiter or athletes or I mean, there will be things. I think having a human involved will be a premium, and people will pay for that. They'll seek that out, and that will be there, or entertainment. But I mean, even look at like Hollywood. Like, again, the white papers are saying that the movie industry is moving toward, animation, right? Or avatar realism or deepfake, so they don't have to pay, the actors and royalties and stuff like that. They might use a voice, or might use a synthesized voice, and they'll automate it, and it'll be close enough. So like that is happening right now. We've probably seen the zenith time in movie production of authentic acting, I guess, like a Harrison Ford or something like that. Now you're going to have, taking on movies and stuff and say, what would it cost to get a team of animators to create this person? It's crazy, right? I wrote about that I presented on that on PBS in 2019, that how that was starting to really pick up speed, and the U.S. Department of Defense was starting to talk about that much more. So Old Humble said, when it comes to AI liability, we're postulating 2020 problems with 2040 solutions. It won't be. It's a great way to put that. Actually, I wish I would have wrote that in the book. Yeah. So, and Marshall McLuhan, in the book, The Massage is the Message. It's massage. It should have been message. It should have been the message is the medium. It's the massage of the medium. It was a typo when they did the cover in the 60s, and he let it go. But he was saying the same thing, like we're always rearview mirror looking to try to figure out the problems, and the solutions are always a time space apart. As Old Humboldt just said, we're thinking about these problems today, and we're in the solutions of problems of having that 20-year time span apart, right? So, and again, I mean, nobody can perfectly predict the future. That's a really good point, Joe. Old Humble. Honestly, I don't see full automation coming anytime soon. What happens if the AI fails? Biggest example we have today is airliners. They fly and land themselves all right. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's coming soon. I think AI is going to, again, I think the pandemic has driven big companies to accelerate their AI development and their AI planning, and automation. And I think it's happening. Again, I'm not for or against. I just say I think it's happening. Old Humble saying, to begin, it depends on how you define any time soon. Several things have to happen, and it won't be by itself. but it could happen. It could happen rapidly. There's just a lot of cars, a lot of operators of planes. There's much fewer planes operators. Yep. So yeah, and again, if the motor vehicle companies, of the government, insurance, all these kind of come together on this stuff, this could move pretty fast. So again, this is a small example and it's not exactly comparable, right? But remember how we all had to move to digital TVs and all of that, and like it happened really fast, and that just did. And if we come back to look how fast we adopted smartphones, and I wrote about that in my book of like how the anticipation for like smartphones and stuff like that, and then actually how fast the adoption of that was completely different. Like once the technology was there, it was adopted and proliferated really fast. So you only have to get a saturation level of so much, and then it just kind of takes over. But I think once we can get a clear vision of things, like a year or two outside of like the shortages and maybe some of the political things like this, it could move really fast. So yeah. And what are the consequences of airline crashes in a personal vehicle? But it's the safest mode of transportation. So yeah. And I don't think anybody will ever say we can design failure out of things. Like we can account for every variable. But I think so. I guess look at Pete Buttigieg's statement a couple days ago saying, and I went through his plan, the plan they released. Of one of the components was, automating the vehicles, but it was clear in there would still be accidents, right? Things would still happen. But if you could substantially decrease it, let's say you could, so there's 40,000 a year people die on the roads on average. If you could decrease it to 10,000 or less, so yeah, I think it's, yeah, I think it'll kind of change like some of the liability. And then at some point, I mean, you'll have some immunity or some caps put in to that. I would guess that there'd be something like that put in. Bolo saying, so the truckers are demonstrating for their meaning in life. Maybe, that's another angle of this Bolo, right? There is this aspect as you look at that of saying, in 20 years, what's automation going to do to the trucking industry? Now, I think right now their what they're doing is to protest government restrictions and but there is this other component of it too, of like in 20 years from now, we're projected to have trucker shortage, all that, but what will truck driving be more automated, at least maybe until that last mile? Will these truckers be more last mile instead of like doing the overall? And will 3D printing decrease the amount of things that have to be hauled from one place to another versus like manufactured in those areas? And so it's kind of like where Robert Travis and I were talking, like some of these things are kind of hit. I don't know if they're ending or they're changing, but there is a weird component of this, of truck driving, and the lifestyle that's with that is changing. It's slowly changing right now, but it could quickly change. So there is maybe this existential demonstration that's happening right now, which applies to all of us. Like, what is our agency and purpose in a world which automates? And I don't know if it leaves us behind, but how do we interface with that? Yeah, I don't know. This is Bacon All Humble. If I weren't accepting that anything could happen, I'd almost say never, at least as far as it becoming 100% automated. So, I think the movie, again, I, Robot, is, I think one of what I would say my perception is it's more of an accurate take of how AI and robotics might present themselves down the road for us 20, 30 years. I at least like, the first half of that movie. So, but I don't know. I mean, it's kind of weird. Like if we were if we took ourselves back and were to think of like, that you'd pull up at a gas station, try to think of telling somebody in the 60s or 70s, you'll pull up to a gas station and you'll use your credit card at the pump and a screen will come on and there'll be commercials telling you, or you can press a button and it'll talk to the person and like inside of you. And these people will be like, what? So, um, there's, I was watching this documentary about the Houston Astrodome, which was built in the 60s, and this modern, marvel at the time. And now they're trying to figure out what to do with it. But the big thing was like the scoreboard was one of these things. Like it was this, and how the scoreboard displays after a home run or something, and were so amazing, right? It was all done like mechanically, to turn the little lights on and off and stuff like that. You can see videos on this stuff, and then now you go to like the Arlington, Texas, the stadium where the Cowboys play stuff. It's massive high definition, color screen and show real time stuff, and that's not that long of a time, right? 1960 to like 2010 when that stadium opened, 50 years. You go back in 1960 and you say, yeah, this is pretty cool, but 50 years from now, there'll be a screen 230 feet long by 80 feet high, and it'll be a super high resolution, and you can instantly show like the people on the field and be like, what? No way. Old almost saying, what is our agency and purpose, or how do we sell our time, or how do we trick people into selling us their time rather than spending it themselves? The old, if money were no object question. Oh God, that's good. That's that's something that could have been in the book. It didn't think about, but you're right. We get to a point when it's going to come down to your value is like, yeah, what do you have to offer as a human, right? Like what is so is it going to be, entertainment, or is it going to, I don't know. How do you sell your time? How do you get other people, right? So that becomes, and that's where, so like the Catholic Church right now is this big crisis of how do we bring people into church? How do we maintain people in church? It's like these two priests on this podcast. Like, I forget, but Godsplaining is what it's called. The Godsplaining podcast. So right there, God meaning. So be good. Yeah. So they're getting into this because I think the younger generation, or the millennials, right? Or if you're between like age maybe 20 and 30, 20 and 35, like you've got to look at this and say, whoa, like what is my agency and purpose down the road? Like, you could think about saving and retirement, things like that, but housing market's kind of pricing you out, and like, yeah, I don't think the young people really realize this yet, but what is their, I think about it for my kids, who are still in school, like what is their agency and purpose? Like as they pick a career, they pick what they're going to do, or even like hobbies or things like this. Like what does agency and purpose look like? And that's where I'm thinking, hopefully we'll never lose touch with nature and things like that. But again, Metaverse wants to create this nature experience. So you never have to leave the Metaverse. Don't have to put up with swatting mosquitoes. Bacon's or Olam was saying, Bacon, yep, for a while there was both digital and analog, then one day there's digital. Yeah, and right now, isn't there a movement? It's going to happen like in the next month where 3G will no longer be supported nationwide, 3G networks. So if you have 3G phone or whatever, it just won't work. So, so some of these, I don't know, some of the vehicles that came out that had the 3G, like if they would still, like the wireless stuff would still work or stuff. But some of the stuff will just be like, it won't work anymore. Just shut off. And that scoreboard I honestly, I watched videos of that scoreboard. I think the scoreboard was awesome, and I believe it's still there and still functioning. Like because I think right, Houston is still trying to figure out what to do with the Astrodome. So there's been multiple proposals, but yeah, There's a video of the Houston Astrodome scoreboard. So, man. So again, I mean, imagine like you're there when that stadium opens in the 60s, and then this is all like no one had seen anything like this, right? A dome, artificial turf, and this scoreboard, like everything's just like, oh my God. Imagine they go back from 1960 to 1910. Holy smokes. Like someone who would have gone to a game in 1910 at a ballpark, and then they go to this game in 1960. But then imagine 2010 when they open up the stadium in Arlington where the Cowboys play, and seats almost 100,000 people, and this incredible basically TV high definition up above everybody, and this audio system and stuff like that. And scoreboard's gone. That's not, I'm sad to hear that, but there's a lot of videos of it. So it was ripped out because buttons, and okay, well, I guess it's been gone a while then. So that's too bad. Yeah, that is, wow. Yeah, so this is the FCC's closing 3G bandwidth. So it's even that kind of thing, like if you preserve your old technology, if you're off the grid, like if I have a Sony Genesis or a Sega Genesis, I can play that probably forever. But like I have friends in the 3D printing community who are like, I don't know, like keep what we have now and the stuff offline, because once the stuff kind of gets integrated and online and on over the air updates, like there will be an obsolescence with some of those things. Remember the wave? Of course, remember the wave. It's the wave right there. Scoreboard took up the entire outfield, but a mini version is at Minute Maid Park for the Astros. That's cool. So, God, So, I think we don't realize how fast things move around us with just technology and just social changes. And like I was watching the movie Jaws a couple weeks ago, and what stood out in the movie Jaws, so filmed in the 70s, right? Like a lot of the guys wore suits or suit coats, or like dress pants and stuff like that, like just the regular stuff that they were doing in the community, and summer stuff like that. But I'm like, there was just this formality in just how like even how quickly we kind of moved away from that as a society, into this less formal aspect of ourselves. But it was weird. Like of all the things to kind of stick out from that movie, I'm like, whoa, like look at all these people are coming to these city meetings, and it's 1970 some, and they got their, or the women got their dresses or the other stuff on, and I was like, whoa. I mean, so all right, thanks for being here, Joe. Appreciate it. We had a great chat. So I'm going to be hitting the hay here in just a second too. So so this is to Bolo from Bacon. So thanks again, and I appreciate your channel. You can subscribe to Old Humble Distilling Company, and Thursday nights, Joe and Lisa and other guests on the show. And Joe is doing other random shows where he'll set his camera up inside the distillery and say, here, I'm doing this, like in the distillery. And actually I learned a lot from just watching some videos. I remember like I posted a question to him. I'm like, is that equipment you made, or is that like, did you buy that somewhere? Because like some of the stuff is kind of custom, and but it's really cool. So yeah, subscribe to Old Humble Distilling. I bet you Bacon will put the link in there. Definitely do that right there. Yeah. Joe's a good guy, and yeah, just good guy. Subscribe to the channel. Thursday nights. It's Joe, guest, Lisa, and Lisa says you can mail anything. So in the postal mail anything, receive anything. Not dangerous, but you can mail anything. That's kind of her motto. So you're gonna have T-shirts made up that way. So it's slogans. You can mail anything. So, Bacon to Bolo. I remember both the wave and people bringing beach balls to Dodgers games. Sad that security ruined the fun. Had a video of a dude trying to get a wave going with a ball. Oh my God. Yeah, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. I remember at Lambeau Field in the 90s. I went to every home game in the 90s, and you'd get early, you could get down by the railing. Players would be out, and this guy comes out, and he has a sign, whatever, like, go far or something. He pulls out this huge bayonet, or this knife, Bowie knife. Thing's like 18, 20 inches long. And he pulls it out, and he takes duct tape, and he's cutting these pieces of duct tape off it with his knife, and security's there and people around him. No one's like, the guy's, and I'm just like, holy smokes. And then, he puts his knife back in his, holster there or whatever. And then he puts this thing by, and pulls his big knife out to cut these things. I'm like, today, first of all, I wouldn't get into the stadium with something like that, but I was like, holy smokes, man, that is wild. That's wild. Bolo's saying there's still a place in my heart where we can still do. Yeah, I'm with you. And that's kind of with the velocity of information is when you get to the end of it, it poses this question of, you're going to be in control. You can make the decision. You can have the information. You can have people contact you in a second. You can have everybody track your every move, and you can do that. You can submit to that if you want that. So you're never out of the loop. And you're going to have to make a decision. How much do you want to be plugged in, I guess, to the matrix versus do you want to still have an opportunity to plug to not be plugged in? The book really ends with that of kind of saying it's, this is where we're at. And also, this whole thing of, as humans in a day, we all woke up to be essential or non-essential, all of us. And we don't talk about that enough. And the fact it's just kind of water under the bridge right now, but that's really jarring that one day we all got up in March of 2020 and we were either essential or non-essentials. And how does that impact as you do a job, or you're finding value, or is your church then non-essential, or a dispensary was essential, but a place that did breast cancer screenings was non-essential, and dentist was non-essential. And so this whole agency and purpose just got mangled up, and yeah, and sometimes being essential wasn't a great thing, right? So you're essential. Oh, so you're stocking shelves at night, or you're the truck driver who now drives without a break in an 11-hour shift. So it's again, I think some of the stuff, because it's documented in the book, people have already kind of forgotten it existed. It is really strange. Like, the people will read through or be like, oh, I didn't know that you could report large gatherings like online. I'm like, yeah, there's a section in the book about that. That was Bellevue, Washington. Here's a link out to a video that's on my server, which will show you. People are like, that really happened? Yeah, you lived through it. It happened probably by you too, right? And essential, non-essential, people be like, I don't remember that. I was deemed essential or non-essential. I don't remember that. So I think people kind of forget this. So the book is also this thing of, I don't know if we were all traumatized or whatever going through this, but it's kind of like a reckoning of, yeah, we went through this. All of us did. So, well, I will have a formal show. I do have my locksmith guest coming on, which is going to be awesome. And so get your locksmith questions ready for that. And again, I'm going to have a formal show, and then I'm going to be moving really quickly here into breaking up parts of the book. So we'll talk about finite voltage. We'll talk about crowd in behavior, and face validity and indicators. And we'll have shows on that because I want to get those rolling before the book comes out here, which will be April 11th. So yeah, those are really kind of the main points. So thank you, everybody. Keep those watch hours going. Bolo, keep that device going. Let's see here. How to Surfer put face validities. Fridays are great. So I've enjoyed those shows. Usually take 4 headlines, and we analyze the headline for what the wording means, what the intent, and is it written by staff? Is it written by a person? And then what are we observing? Does it match this? And I've learned more on that. Like, one of the things I've learned, right? If the headline itself will say like, according to whatever this research, or this person said, or something, like that, is going to be a much stronger article than just saying Something like pandemic caused a spike in shoplifting. Like that's a low key, like that's just kind of blaming the pandemic. But if you say, like retailers in Allegheny County, in Allegheny County retailers report spike in retail thefts in last year. It's like, whoa, it's county, so retailers, there's some data there. It's different. So, I'm getting better. Like I'm actually doing some more research on trying to figure out how people try to manipulate you through the headlines. And some of the stuff is really well done. Some that, they just throw out there, they just put a headline on it. So, all right. So let us do this. Let us leave this great show the same way we entered this great show. And that is, of course, with our kind of intro here. So everybody, I want to thank you so much for being here. Bacon, Bolo, All Pro Lemonton. I think Joe's already left, but you guys know it. So I'm here in chilly Wisconsin, wishing all of you the best. And thanks so much for supporting the channel, for watching the channel. And the Velocity of Information, April 11th, will be out. So greatly appreciate it. And I am out of here, folks.
Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio host, and nationally recognized safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Join us each week as we discuss the best and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. Follow Dr. Perrodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.